Chapter 607. Although Qianshan Jinwu was injured by the burning sky palm after exchanging a blow with Ji Tianqing, he was still confident. However, he was still confident. Moreover, he stimulated his potential even more and erupted with his peak combat strength. Heaven and Earth Furnace. Qianshan Jinwu roared and waved his heavy sword without hesitation, slashing out 9 sword auras in all directions. The 9 sword auras were dozens of meters long and contained the power to split the heavens and earth. They were extremely violent. However, none of the 9 sword lights were aimed at Ji Tianqing's front, back, left, and right. The people in the square were puzzled when they saw this scene. They did not understand what Qianshan Jinwu was trying to do. In the next instant, a shocking scene appeared. The 9 sword auras seemed to casually slash the arena and the sky, bursting out a dazzling dark red brilliance. However, the earth-shattering dark red light enveloped the entire arena, turning it into a huge and towering furnace. There were boundless flames in the furnace. They rose fiercely and rolled as if they had the power to burn the sky and boil the sea. Qianshan Jinwu stood in the sky above the furnace, exuding a violent domineering aura. He shouted in a deep voice, "Heaven and Earth Furnace, I am the master. Ji Tianqing, your life is in my hands." As he spoke, Qianshan Jinwu suddenly raised his left hand. A shocking hurricane immediately swept up in the furnace, carrying flames that could burn everything and swept toward Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing was in the dark red furnace. He was like a piece of charcoal that was about to be ignited, burned, and finally turned into ashes. The situation was just as Qianshan Jinwu said. The entire arena had turned into a huge furnace. It was like Qianshan Jinwu's domain, and everything was under his control. If Ji Tianqing could not escape the suppression of the furnace, he would definitely be burned to ashes. Fortunately, he had already mastered the 5 elements and had the power of the red flame true fire. No matter how powerful the heaven and earth furnace was, it could not do anything to him for a while. In this dangerous situation, Ji Tianqing was still calm and composed. He circulated his energy to resist the bombardment of the furnace's flames while thinking of a way to break out. Qianshan Jinwu's heaven and earth cauldron not only borrows the power of fire, but also utilizes the Tao of array formations and the wondrous Tao of sword. In addition, his heavy sword has also disappeared. It must have merged with the heaven and earth furnace to provide power for this secret technique. In just a few breaths of time, Ji Tianqing had analyzed the structure and attributes of the heaven and earth furnace. He was just about to observe the essence of the heaven and earth furnace, the foundation of the formation, and the structure of the veined patterns in order to find a way to break it. After all, his attainments in array Tao were extraordinary. Even the average divine prime cultivator was inferior to him. However, Qianshan Jinwu would not give him a chance. He immediately waved his hands and made a seal, launching a powerful attack. Heavenly wind as a saber, earthly fire as a sword. Saber and sword slay the body, furnace to melt the soul. After Qianshan Jinwu formed the Dharma seal, he continuously waved his palms and injected his majestic true essence into the heaven and earth furnace. Instantly, a violent gust of wind blew in the furnace, and the raging flames condensed into thousands of flaming swords, shooting towards Ji Tianqing like a rain of arrows. With the help of the wind, the power of the thousands upon thousands of flaming sword lights immediately increased to the limit, becoming incomparably violent. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Thousands upon thousands of flaming sword lights instantly drowned Ji Tianqing's figure and bombarded him fiercely. Bang, bang, bang. A deafening explosion erupted, causing the ground within a radius of dozens of miles to shake violently. Everyone opened their eyes wide, staring at the flaming sword lights in the furnace, looking for Ji Tianqing's figure. In their eyes, Ji Tianqing was killed by the thousands upon thousands of flaming sword lights. The sword lights were so powerful that even a 1,000-meter-tall mountain would be turned into dust in an instant. Ji Tianqing would be severely injured if not killed by such a fierce attack. Sigh. It seems that Ji Tianqing is still slightly inferior. Well, Qianshan Jinwu is too powerful. Although he is only at Sky Origin Stage LV7, he is as powerful as an ordinary Sky Origin Stage LV8 cultivator. What an exciting and intense battle. I didn't expect Qianshan Jinwu to have mastered such a marvelous secret skill. Ji Tianqing is doomed to lose. He will definitely lose today. It would be fine if he was only injured and defeated. I am afraid that he will be killed by the thousands of swords. It is such a pity for such a peerless genius to die like this. While countless people were discussing, the thousands upon thousands of sword lights in the furnace finally dissipated. Ji Tianqing's figure appeared again. He was in perfect condition, and it seemed like he was fine. After all, when the thousands upon thousands of sword lights bombarded him, he used the golden rock wings in time to protect himself with the golden wings. However, using the golden wings to protect himself consumed a large amount of true core power. His face was pale, and he was panting heavily. His martial arts were fading quickly. His originally spotless white robe was now charred black. Countless holes had been burned into it, making him look somewhat miserable. Qianshan Jinwu was stunned. He couldn't believe it. He blocked my thousands upon thousands of sword lights. How is that possible? After being stunned for a moment, Qianshan Jinwu's eyes fell on Ji Tianqing's golden wings. He immediately realized the problem. So it was that treasure that saved him. Back in Giant Spiritual City, he used his wings to block the lightning attack of the mighty miracle god. No matter how powerful my ultimate skill is, it can't be compared to the lightning pillar of the mighty miracle god. Could it be that I can't do anything to Ji Tianqing? Qianshan Jinwu frowned, and his eyes became a little gloomy. At this moment, Ji Tianqing circulated his martial arts for a moment. His true core power was restored smoothly, and his face returned to normal. He immediately unleashed his secret technique and shot out a black pillar of water that soared into the sky, blasting towards the edge of the heaven and earth furnace. Black water rope. The surging black water pillar was hundreds of meters tall and as thick as a house. It was like a huge black dragon. This was the first time Ji Tianqing used the black water rope in a battle after mastering it. Although the black water rope was not violent enough, he believed that water could suppress fire. The black water rope would definitely be able to suppress the heaven and earth furnace. Bang! The dragon-like black water rope fiercely hit the barrier of the heaven and earth furnace, and a dull sound rang out. A large hole appeared in the wall of light formed by the dark red flames, and dozens of cracks appeared. However, the heaven and earth furnace's barrier was too thick, and its defensive power was very strong. The black water rope could not penetrate it. Ji Tianqing's eyes flashed, and he shouted in a low voice, "It's really effective. Then let's do it again and completely break through the heaven and earth furnace." Under his control, the dragon-like black water rope flew back, circled twice in the air, and fiercely hit the heaven and earth furnace's barrier. Bang! This time, the heaven and earth furnace's barrier was finally broken through, and a huge hole appeared. The dark red flames immediately leaked out, and the entire heaven and earth furnace shook violently. Seeing this, Qianshan Jinwu's face turned gloomy, and a resolute cold light flashed in his eyes. Chapter 608. Qianshan Jinwu saw that Ji Tianqing had mastered the water secret skill, which could restrain the power of the furnace of heaven and earth. Therefore, he didn't repair the hole in the furnace of heaven and earth. Instead, he used a horrifying move that was similar to self-explosion. Furnace C, heaven and earth collapse. Qianshan Jinwu shouted in a low voice. He waved his hands and made a seal. The furnace of heaven and earth with a radius of 200 meters exploded completely. Boom! At that instant, the furnace collapsed and was obliterated, and it erupted with might capable of obliterating the heavens and the earth. It erupted with boundless blazing flames that completely filled the entire arena. Nothing could be seen on the arena except for the dark red fire. The loud sound that shook the sky spread over a radius of 100 miles. It even shook the sky reaching peak of the imperial court. Fortunately, the imperial tutor had strengthened the defense array and blocked the power of the furnace of heaven and earth. Otherwise, when the power that could destroy the heavens and the earth erupted, the boundless flames would spread out and burn everything within a radius of 100 miles, turning it into scorched earth and ruins. The square shook violently. Countless civilians and martial artists were shaken. Some people couldn't stand still and fell to the ground. Even so, no one cared about their own safety. They stared at the arena that was like a sea of fire. It's over. Ji Tianqing is dead. Such a horrifying explosion. Even the heavens and earth will be destroyed, let alone flesh and blood. The furnace of heaven and earth has exploded. How can the charcoal in the furnace survive? Sigh. What a pity for a newly emerged peerless talent. A powerhouse at Sky Origin Stage 7 can actually use such a destructive secret skill. Is this really the power and skill of a martial artist? Yun Yao, Ji Ku, Yen, and the others in the crowd all turned pale. Their eyes were fixed on the sea of fire, and their hearts were filled with worry. They believed that Ji Tianqing was invincible. Even if he fought against Qianshan Jinwu, who was at Sky Origin Stage 7, he wouldn't lose. However, they also knew that it was only a fantasy. It would never happen. No matter how outstanding Ji Tianqing was, he was still a human, not a god. In their eyes, Ji Tianqing being able to kill Duanmu Yulong and fight Qianshan Jinwu to this extent was already a world-shaking miracle. At this moment, they no longer hoped that Ji Tianqing could win. As long as Ji Tianqing could live safely, that was enough. Finally, the sea of fire that filled the entire arena gradually dissipated. The arena regained its clarity, and everyone could see the situation clearly. He saw that the entire arena had already collapsed, turning into scorched earth and shattered rocks that were still emitting spirals of black smoke. Qianshan Jinwu was standing in the sky, while Ji Tianqing was standing on top of the rubble. He was hunched over and gasping for breath. The white robe he wore had already turned to ashes and completely disappeared. He was only left with a set of soft armor, but it was also full of holes and pitch black. The brilliance of the golden wings was very dim. Dark red blood flowed down from the corner of his mouth and fell on the scorched earth and ruins. The dark red shattered rocks still contained a terrifying heat. They evaporated his blood and turned it into 5-colored light spots that spread out. Obviously, Ji Tianqing had blocked the power of the heaven and earth furnace's self-explosion. He was not killed on the spot, but he was seriously injured. Seeing this scene, everyone was stunned. Tens of thousands of people and martial artists burst into an incredulous exclamation. They were so excited that they danced and spoke incoherently. Oh my God! This is a miracle! Ji Tianqing endured such a destructive attack and still survived. If I didn't see it with my own eyes, I would never believe it. Even if Ji Tianqing is defeated today, he has created a miracle. Although he has lost, it is still a glorious defeat. This is too scary. With Ji Tianqing's performance, even in the Emperor Mansion, he must be a top genius. In the sky, the Imperial Tutor and Long Yunxiao were also in disbelief. The Imperial Tutor's eyes were shining. He thought to himself, Ji Tianqing is indeed the successor of Kenshin. In the future, he will definitely become the second Kenshin. Unfortunately, he has not had enough time to grow. If he was given another month or two, he might really be able to create a miracle and defeat Qianshan Jinwu. Long Yunxiao's mood was very complicated. He muttered to himself, Ji Tianqing, oh Ji Tianqing, you are really a fearsome and respectful opponent. I am the #1 genius of the human race, but I have long been defeated by you. If it were not for Yao Yao, I would really like to be friends with you. At this moment, Qianshan Jinwu also came to his senses. He shouted with a serious face, "Ji Tianqing. You should be proud of yourself for being able to block my ultimate killing move. At this point, you are already an arrow at the end of its flight. How can you fight with me? For hundreds of years, there has never been a genius like you in our race. I don't want to kill you. Just admit defeat." Qianshan Jinwu was very clear that he could defeat Ji Tianqing because he had been practicing martial arts for more than 40 years. Ji Tianqing was only an 18-year-old young man, who had only been practicing martial arts for 1/3 of his time. If Ji Tianqing was given another year, he would definitely not be a match for Ji Tianqing. However, Ji Tianqing slowly raised his head and looked at him with clear eyes. He said in a low and firm voice, "No. I will never admit defeat. Qianshan Jinwu, you are indeed very strong. You are the strongest opponent I have ever met in my life. However, I have not fallen yet, so you have not won." As soon as he finished speaking, he activated the remaining 60% of his power and performed his ultimate killer move. Sword of Judgment. The sword embryo in his body flew out and instantly turned into a 30-meter-long holy sword with dazzling golden light. The holy sword was surrounded by golden flames as if it had a pair of wings. It exploded with unstoppable power and charged toward Qianshan Jinwu. Qianshan Jinwu's expression changed immediately. Apparently, he did not expect that Ji Tianqing, who was at the end of its flight, could still perform such a powerful killer move. At this critical moment, he held the heavy sword tightly with both hands and unleashed his majestic true core strength to form a sword-like barrier in front of him. In the next moment, the Sword of Judgment hit the sword-like barrier hard, bursting out a thunderous sound. Boom! Crack! Golden light burst out and covered the sky. It was as if there was a golden sun in the sky, which dazzled the entire square. Qianshan Jinwu was immediately sent flying backward and crashed into the light barrier of the defensive array. Boom! He was bounced back by the light barrier and fell from the sky. He spat out a mouthful of blood. After injuring Qianshan Jinwu, the Sword of Judgment quickly shrank back into the sword embryo and flew back into Ji Tianqing's body. At the same time, Ji Tianqing opened the third eye on his forehead and stared at Qianshan Jinwu, who was falling from the sky. Thunderbolt! Ji Tianqing shouted in a low voice and released all the thunderbolt power in his spiritual eye. The extremely violent thunderbolt condensed into a blue light beam that was more than 10 meters long and as thick as a bucket. It slashed toward Qianshan Jinwu. Kaboom! Chapter 609. The destructive lightning beam hit Qianshan Jinwu. The azure lightning completely enveloped his figure. Once again, he was sent flying backwards and crashed heavily into the light wall of the formation, causing a muffled bang. Then he fell from the sky into the ruins. He rolled a few times before he stopped. His body was burnt black. He was so twisted that he didn't look like a human being anymore. Blue lightning surrounded him. There were hundreds of wounds all over his body. Blood gushed out from the wounds and dyed the ruins red. Qianshan Jinwu, who was so powerful a moment ago, was severely injured by Ji Tianqing's 2 moves. It was too horrible to look at. This scene made everyone in the square dumbfounded. They had all seen it. Countless civilians and martial practitioners let out cries of disbelief and discussion. Even Kun Wu, Fox Princess, and Tai Yi of the Water Clan, who were watching the battle silently, were shocked. Wasn't Ji Tianqing severely injured? How can he still use such a horrifying skill? He is about to lose, but he can still fight back. Is he going to turn the tables and defeat Qianshan Jinwu? After today, the situation in King's Mansion will change again. Ji Tianqing has only been in King's Mansion for 2 months, and he is already so powerful. Ji Tianqing tried his best to straighten his body and stand on the scorched earth. His face was pale, and he was sweating. Blood kept pouring out from his wounds. He looked miserable. After using the Sword of Judgment, he had used up 30% of his energy. He only had 30% left. At this point, his combat strength was also extremely weak, and he couldn't even suppress his injuries. He couldn't care about his injuries. He could only use the self-healing ability of Kenshin blood to recover slowly. Qianshan Jinwu, who was lying in the ruins, struggled to get up. Qianshan Jinwu's injuries were worse than Ji Tianqing's. His face was distorted beyond recognition. He didn't look like a human being at all. However, he was a level 7 Sky Origin Stage cultivator after all. He still had 40% of his power, and there was still powerful spiritual energy running inside his body. As he circulated his internal energy to suppress his injuries, he staggered across the ruins and walked towards Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing. Even if you severely injured me, how much power do you have left? I've said it before, it's impossible for you to defeat me, and it's impossible for you to create miracles. Victory is mine, and the title of Tianqian Region Lord is mine. Qianshan Jinwu roared in a low voice. He gripped his golden sword tightly again and slashed towards Ji Tianqing with an earth-shattering sword. Qianshan. Mie Jin. Qianshan Jinwu unleashed the last 40% of his power and displayed the unique skill of the Qianshan family that had been passed down for centuries. This sword was 100 meters long and shone with dazzling 5-colored light. It truly had the power to destroy 100 miles of heaven and earth and annihilate 1,000 mountains. Although this wasn't his most beautiful move, it was his most powerful trump card. Qianshan Jinwu didn't hesitate to use this sword to end the battle. Ji Tianqing didn't want to be outdone. He activated the last 30% of his power and performed a unique skill. Tianqing. 5 extremes. He waved his palms and made a mysterious seal. He communicated with the world with his spiritual mind and soul, and instantly controlled the power of heaven and earth within 100 miles. Within 100 miles, a hurricane was blowing in the sky. All the spiritual chi of the 5 elements gathered and rushed into the arena. All of a sudden, a giant sword that was also 100 meters long appeared in the sky and slashed towards Qianshan Jinwu. Qianshan Jinwu's unique skill was a unique skill passed down from his family. It was a powerful killing move that he released with all his power. Ji Tianqing's unique skill absorbed the power of heaven and earth within 100 miles and added 30% of his own power. The 2 heaven-splitting swords were equally powerful. Both of them had the power to destroy the world. Boom! Under everyone's gaze, the 2 giant swords collided with each other and made a loud noise that shook the sky. At that moment, the arena within a radius of 200 meters was completely filled with 5-colored flames. It became so dazzling that nothing could be seen. The ground within a few dozen miles shook violently. The people in the square were also shaken. The deafening noise reverberated in the sky for dozens of seconds before it gradually stopped. When the 5-colored light dissipated, everyone could see the situation in the arena clearly. Without a doubt, the arena had disappeared again. The scorched earth and ruins were gone. There was only a huge pit with a radius of 200 meters left. At the southern edge of the huge pit, Ji Tianqing leaned against the barrier of the array. Blood was flowing out of his body. He was completely covered in blood. He was severely injured. His vital essence had been exhausted. The sword embryo in his body had become dim. Without the support of his vital essence, the Kenshin battle robe had also been retracted into his body. He couldn't use it anymore. At this moment, he was truly at the end of his rope. He didn't have any battle strength left. At the northern edge of the huge pit, Qianshan Jinwu sat on the ground. His back was against the barrier of the array. He was panting with his eyes closed. His golden sword had fallen into the huge pit, but he couldn't pick it up. It was difficult for him to even move his fingers. He had also exhausted all his strength. He didn't have any battle strength left. Any strong commoner youth would be able to beat him up. Of course, his injuries were even more severe. His entire body was a bloody mess. He looked like a piece of roasted meat. Ji Tianqing and Qianshan Jinwu were both panting silently. Neither of them had the strength to speak. The tens of thousands of people and warriors in the square stared at this scene with their mouths agape. They were all shocked and surprised. The crowd was quiet for a moment. Then, they started discussing like a flash flood. How could this be? What kind of result is this? Who won? Does anyone understand? Can anyone explain? Ji Tianqing and Qianshan Jinwu have both exhausted their strength. They are seriously injured. It's impossible to tell who won. Don't tell me, the two of them are tied. A draw. Ji Tianqing didn't lose. He tied with Qianshan Jinwu, who was at Sky Origin Stage LV7. Isn't this too unbelievable? Miracle. This is a real miracle. Although it's a draw, in my heart, the winner is Ji Tianqing. That's right. Ji Tianqing is younger than Qianshan Jinwu by more than 30 years. He is 4 levels lower than Qianshan Jinwu, but he tied with him. This is a victory. Not only were the people talking excitedly, but Yun Yao, Ji Ku, and Yan were also excited and relieved. They kept cheering for Ji Tianqing. Ling Yi Xiong, Kunwu, Fox Princess, Tai Yi, and the other princes were also shocked. They couldn't believe this result. High up in the sky, the imperial tutor and Long Yunxiao were also surprised. They showed complicated expressions. They exchanged glances and secretly discussed for a while. Then, the imperial tutor flew to the top of the arena and announced the result. The final battle is over. Everyone has seen the result. Ji Tianqing and Qianshan Jinwu tied. Chapter 610. The result announced by the imperial tutor caused countless people to discuss. But in the eyes of the crowd, his decision was undoubtedly the best choice. Ji Tianqing and Qianshan Jinwu were tied, so the emperor could only make a decision. After all, the 9 southern regions were all under the imperial court. Every region leader was an overlord, but they were also loyal generals of the imperial court. They had to follow the imperial court's deployment and orders. In the discussion of countless people, the imperial tutor waved his hand and removed the defensive formation. Then, he waved his sleeves and shot out 2 beams of green wood light. The 2 beams of green wood light entered the bodies of Ji Tianqing and Qianshan Jinwu, immediately suppressing their injuries and restoring their vitality. Then, the imperial tutor used a formation to gather the power of heaven and earth and restore the square to its original state. After doing all this, he left the square with Ji Tianqing and Qianshan Jinwu and flew to the imperial court at the top of the mountain. Long Yunxiao followed closely behind and rushed to the top of the mountain. After a while, the imperial tutor, Ji Tianqing, and Qianshan Jinwu arrived at the top of the mountain and entered the palace of heaven and earth. The 2 of them stood in the hall and waited. The imperial tutor went to the emperor's study to report the news. Not long after, the imperial tutor returned and said to the 2 of them in a dignified voice, "His Majesty the Emperor is in the study. The 2 of you can go and see him." Ji Tianqing and Qianshan Jinwu nodded and left the hall together. They rushed to the emperor's study. When the 2 of them entered the study, they saw that there was only the emperor sitting behind the desk in the simple and elegant study. The emperor was wearing a golden dragon robe and a purple gold dragon crown. His aura was dignified and sacred. His eyes contained a mysterious power that could see through the hearts of people. The 2 of them walked to the study and stood still. They bowed together and paid their respects. "Greetings, His Majesty the Emperor." The emperor looked at their miserable appearance and nodded slightly. He said in a dignified voice, "Rise." This emperor never thought that the battle between the 2 of you would end up like this. This is truly surprising. Especially Ji Tianqing. He is only at the 3rd level of Sky Origin Stage, yet he has created such a miracle. What a miracle! The emperor actually praised Ji Tianqing to his face without hesitation. This was definitely a great honor. Qian Shanzhenwu's expression changed slightly. His heart was filled with envy and jealousy. However, Ji Tianqing's expression remained calm and composed. He cupped his hands and said, "Thank you for your praise, Your Majesty. You're neither arrogant nor rash." "Very good." The emperor nodded slightly, revealing a satisfied look. When Qian Shanzhenwu saw that the emperor admired and thought highly of Ji Tianqing, he immediately cursed in his heart. He already had a bad premonition. At this moment, the emperor spoke again, "Both of you are geniuses of my clan. One of you is a peerless genius, while the other is a genius with extraordinary talent. No matter who was chosen to be the Tianqian region lord, he would be the best candidate. However, before I make a decision, I want to ask both of you why you want to be the Tianqian region lord regardless of your life and death." After that, the emperor added in a dignified tone, "Both of you must tell the truth. There can be no falsehood in your words." His eyes became deep and mysterious. He quietly emitted invisible divine soul power, which covered Ji Tianqing and Qian Shanzhenwu. The emperor, who had cultivated the Dharma form of the primordial spirit and mastered the means of the gods, could see through people's hearts and souls at a glance. In front of him, Ji Tianqing and Qian Shanzhenwu could not hide anything from him. It was impossible for them to lie. "Qian Shanzhenwu, you go first." The emperor looked at Qian Shanzhenwu with dignified eyes and said in a low voice. Qian Shanzhenwu's expression suddenly became serious. He cupped his hands and said respectfully, "Your Majesty, I am the legitimate son of the Qianshan family. Since I was young, I have shouldered the mission of revitalizing the family. During my time as the city lord of Yeni City, I did my best to govern the city and tried my best to show my talent. I wanted to be valued by the imperial court. If I can become the Tianqian region lord, I will not only become a noble overlord, but also revitalize the Qianshan family and protect the territory of the imperial court. I will definitely be loyal to the imperial court and do my best." Qian Shanzhenwu's words were from the bottom of his heart. They were his true thoughts. In front of the emperor, he did not dare to lie. After hearing this, the emperor's expression did not change at all. He was still dignified and solemn. He did not comment on this. He just nodded slightly and looked at Ji Tianqing with dignified eyes. He asked in a low voice, "Ji Tianqing, why are you fighting so hard for the position of the Tianqian region lord?" Ji Tianqing cupped his hands and bowed. His expression was normal as he said, "Reporting to Your Majesty, I do not yearn for the power and prestige of the region lord. I only wish to do my best to protect the stability and peace of the Tianqian region. In the Tianqian region, there is a small backward country called the Qingyun Kingdom. It is my hometown. My family and home are there. In the star ancient realm of the Tianqian region, there is also the Sky Pillar sect. That is my sect. My master, my seniors, and my friends are there. I want to become the Tianqian region lord. Only then can I protect the Tianqian region from the invasion of demons and disasters. Only then can I protect my family and home. I can protect my sect and friends." At this point, Ji Tianqing paused for a moment. He looked at the emperor with a determined gaze and said in a solemn tone, "When the Sky Pillar sect suffered a great calamity and the demon emperor appeared, I was determined to fight the demon emperor with my sect's elders and fellow disciples. Because of this, I was able to defeat the demon emperor and protect the Sky Pillar sect and the star ancient realm. Although I am an insignificant person in the mortal world, I will do my best to protect my family and friends. I will not hesitate to sacrifice my life for this." After listening to his words, the emperor immediately showed a gratified smile and nodded solemnly, "Good. Very good. The imperial court does not appoint anyone to be the Tianqian region lord for you to enjoy the prestige and power of a region lord. It is also not for you to revive your family and seek personal benefits for yourself. A region lord must protect the peace of the region and the people in the region. For this, you will not hesitate to sacrifice your life. This is the true mission of a region lord. The emperor praised Ji Tianqing twice in a row. It was obvious that he approved of Ji Tianqing's idea. Qianshan Zhenwu immediately understood the result. He was filled with disappointment and frustration, and his eyes dimmed. He lowered his head in silence and pondered over the words of Ji Tianqing and the emperor. After a while, he raised his head and bowed to the emperor. "I will remember your majesty's teachings and know what to do from now on." The emperor nodded slightly and announced solemnly, "I announce that from today onwards, the imperial court appoints Ji Tianqing as the Tianshan region lord. Ji Tianqing will hold the region lord's golden seal granted by the imperial court and lead the 10 countries and hundreds of sects in the Tianshan region. He has the power of life and death." After the emperor announced the appointment of the imperial court, he ordered the imperial tutor to draft an imperial edict and announce it to the world and the 9 regions in the south. The battle for the region lord was settled. Ji Tianqing and Qianshan Zhenwu bowed to the emperor and were about to leave the study. Chapter 6:11. After Ji Tianqing left the study, the imperial tutor was already waiting for him outside the door. "Territorial Lord Tianqing, please wait." The imperial tutor waved the horsetail whisk in his hand and stopped him with a kind smile. Ji Tianqing stopped and saluted with his hands folded. "May I ask what orders the imperial tutor has for me?" The imperial tutor stroked his beard and said slowly, "Territorial Lord Tianqing, you are seriously injured now. Please go back and recuperate. In a month, please come to the imperial court again to receive the territorial lord's golden seal and the decree of appointment. Only then can you take up the position. During this time, the imperial court will also issue an imperial decree to announce the news. In addition, the imperial court will build a territorial lord's mansion for you and form a garrison army. These trivial matters will be taken care of by the imperial court, but you will have to wait patiently for a while." Ji Tianqing understood that this was a normal process, so he saluted with his hands folded. "I understand. Thank you, imperial tutor." The imperial tutor smiled and nodded. Then, he left the palace of heaven and earth with him and rushed to the square at the foot of the mountain. When they arrived at the square at the foot of the mountain, Qianshan Zhenwu had already left with a gloomy expression. Nearly 10,000 people in the square looked at Qianshan Zhenwu's lonely figure as he left. They were all discussing enthusiastically. Many people guessed the result when they saw Qianshan Zhenwu's expression and reaction. At this moment, when they saw the imperial tutor bring Ji Tianqing to the square, they were even more convinced of their guess. The emperor's preceptor waved the horsetail whisk in his hand, signaling for everyone to stop talking. Then, he announced in a solemn tone, "Everyone, the emperor has made his decision. He has chosen the most suitable candidate for the position of Heavenly Stellar Region Lord. That's right. Just as everyone guessed and expected, Ji Tianqing will be the territorial lord of Tianshan from today onwards." Although many people had guessed the result. When they heard the imperial tutor announce the result personally, they were inexplicably excited and cheered and shouted. All of a sudden, the plaza was filled with thunderous cheers. Waves of cheers erupted like a mountain torrent. "That's great. Ji Tianqing has indeed become the Heavenly Stellar Region Lord. That's what everyone wants. Ji Tianqing's performance was so perfect, and he's also a peerless genius that only appears once in 100 years. Who else can I choose but him?" Although Qianshan Zhenwu is also very strong, he is far from Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing is only 17 or 18, right? He became a domain lord at such a young age. Oh my God! He's definitely the youngest domain lord in history. An 18-year-old overlord, that's too scary. This is simply unprecedented. Countless commoners and warriors were cheering and discussing excitedly. Over the past few days, they had watched the entire process of the election and witnessed Ji Tianqing's various performances with their own eyes. They had long been conquered by Ji Tianqing's performance. Even those who had looked down on him, mocked him, and gloated at his misfortune were now proud and excited that he had become the domain lord. Yun Yao, Ji Ku, and Yen who were in the crowd, were extremely surprised and cheered without caring about their image. Yun Yao was still able to remain calm. Her beautiful face was filled with surprise and gratification. She whispered to herself, "Tianqing, you'll always be the most dazzling star in the night sky. In just 1 year, you've changed from the young master of the Ji family to the current heavenly stellar region lord. Thinking back on the past year, it's really like a dream." Ji Ku was so excited that tears flowed down her cheeks. She clenched her fists and waved them around. She said excitedly, "Brother Tianqing, you really did it. An 18-year-old domain lord, you've created another miracle." Yen Er's face was also red with excitement. She jumped up and down and shouted excitedly, dancing with Qian Yu. "Senior Tianqing. You're my idol. We're proud of you. The heavenly stellar region is proud of you." Qian Yu flapped her little wings proudly and flew in the air. She smiled and shouted, "La la la. Our old Ji has become the domain lord. The youngest domain lord in history. The most awesome genius. We can do whatever we want on the mainland in the future. If I don't like anyone, I'll send a group of guards to kill them. If any idiot dares to provoke old Ji again, I'll send a garrison army to kill him 10,000 times." After announcing the news, the imperial tutor and Long Yunshao led the imperial guards back to the imperial palace at the peak of the mountain. The citizens in the square were discussing excitedly for a long time and were unwilling to leave. Ji Tianqing had just returned to the crowd and was surrounded by Yun Yao, Ji Ku, and the others. The three of them were full of concern and asked about his injuries. Knowing that his injuries were not life-threatening, everyone began to express their joy and excitement excitedly. At this moment, Ling Yishui, Kun Wu, and Fox Princess all rushed over to congratulate him. "Junior Tianqing, congratulations. I'm afraid I'll have to call you Tianqing Domain Lord the next time we meet, right?" Ling Yishui was more familiar with him, so he joked with him. Kun Wu also smiled and cupped his hands. "Ji Tianqing, from today onwards, you're the most honorable person in the human race. Congratulations." Even Fox Princess came over to congratulate him. She smiled and said, "Prince Tianqing is indeed a peerless genius. You deserve to be the domain lord of the heavenly stellar region. Congratulations." Ji Tianqing smiled and returned the greeting. After exchanging a few words with the three of them, he turned around and left with Yun Yao and the others. Among the crowd in the square, there were a few princes of the human race, Tai of the Aqua tribe, and many other honorable people. These people were secretly paying attention to Ji Tianqing, but their thoughts were complicated. None of them came to get close to Ji Tianqing. Many of them knew that Ji Tianqing had killed Duanmu Yulong, so he had formed a blood feud with the Duanmu family. In the future, the Duanmu family would definitely seek revenge. Even though Ji Tianqing was a peerless genius and the new domain lord of the heavenly stellar region, he was still too young and had no foundation to speak of. Facing an ancient family like the Duanmu family, he could only be completely destroyed. Why would the princes of the human race show him kindness at this moment? 2 hours later, Ji Tianqing, Yun Yao, and the others returned to the Yunlan residence in Liantian City. Ji Tianqing gave a few instructions to the others. Then, he entered the secret chamber in his residence and focused on healing his injuries. Ji Ku, Yen and Qian Yu stayed in his residence, waiting for him to recover. Yun Yao was calm, wise, and meticulous. She was not blinded by surprise. She expected that Ji Tianqing would be in more danger in the future after killing Duanmu Yulong. So, she thought carefully for a long time. When she came up with some countermeasures, she summoned Yun Luo and gave him a few orders to make some arrangements and preparations. Then, she stayed in the Yunlan residence and strengthened the defense and vigilance of the residence to ensure that Ji Tianqing could safely cultivate and heal his injuries. In just a few days, all kinds of news about Ji Tianqing swept across the central plains like the wind. The news that Ji Tianqing had killed Duanmu Yulong and tied with Qian Shan Jinwu had become the domain lord of the heavenly stellar region had become a household name. It had become a topic that everyone knew. Chapter 6:12. Unknowingly, a month had passed. In this month, the news of Ji Tianqing becoming the Tianshan region lord spread throughout the central continent. The imperial court's imperial edict was also issued to the 9 southern regions and was known by all the major forces and countries. In nearly a month, hundreds of millions of people were talking about this matter, and he had truly become a peerless genius known by everyone in the central continent. Early in the morning, Ji Tianqing finished his cultivation and walked out of the secret chamber. Now that his cultivation had fully recovered, his injuries were almost healed. Yun Yao, Ji Ku, Yen, and the others had already been waiting outside for him to come out. When everyone saw that he was in high spirits and had an extraordinary bearing, they all smiled and the worry in their hearts completely dissipated. After Ji Tianqing greeted everyone, he said, "Today is the day I receive the region lord's golden seal and I will leave for the imperial court later. At that time, the imperial court will arrange guards and honor for me and I will return to the Tianshan region to take up my post." Ji Ku and Yen already knew about this and were mentally prepared. Ji Ku quickly said, "Brother Tianqing, I want to go back with you. We have been away from the Qinyan kingdom for a year and it's time to go back and take a look." Yen also said, "Senior brother Tianqing, I also want to go back with you and see the situation of Master and Sky Pillar sect." Ji Tianqing nodded and said with a smile, "I already guessed that you would definitely go back with me." After saying that, he looked at Yun Yao and asked, "Yao Yao, what about you?" Yun Yao hesitated for a moment before shaking her head gently and said, "Although I also want to go back with you and see the situation of Sky Pillar sect, I still have some matters to deal with. But I still have things to deal with here, so I won't be going back with you. Tianqing, although there is the imperial court's honor and guards on the way, you must be careful. Half a month ago, I heard that after Duanmu Yulong died, the Duanmu family hated you to the bone. The Duanmu family head was furious and said that he will make you pay with your blood. I am worried that you will suffer the revenge of the Duanmu family when you leave the central continent." Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows and said with a confident smile, "Yao Yao, don't worry. In the short term, the Duanmu family will not dare to take revenge on me. I killed Duanmu Yulong in the arena and everyone knows about it. If I go to the Tianshan region and I encounter an assassination on the way, there is no need to investigate. Everyone in the world will know that the murderer is Duanmu family. No matter how arrogant the Duanmu clan is, would they dare to assassinate the region lord appointed by the imperial court and openly opposed the imperial court?" It turned out that Ji Tianqing had considered this matter long ago, and he was well aware of the pros and cons involved. That was why he was fearless. Duanmu Yulong, Duanmu Yulong, Duanmu Yulong families Duanmu families Duanmu Yulong s. However, Duanmu Yulong is the most outstanding son of the Duanmu family and the future head of the family. I'm only worried that the Duanmu clan's patriarch would be unable to bear the pain of losing his son and would take the risk out of desperation. Ji Tianqing nodded and said seriously, "Yes, I have to take precautions. I will be careful." Then, everyone waved goodbye to Yun Yao and left the Yunlan courtyard. They rushed to the imperial court. 2 hours later, Ji Tianqing brought Ji Ku and Yen to the heaven-connecting peak and climbed to the imperial court. The imperial tutor was already waiting for him outside the palace of heaven and earth. When he saw him, he led him to the emperor's study. The light was bright and in the elegant study, there was a dazzling golden light. The air was filled with a calming sandalwood fragrance. The object that was emitting the golden light was placed on the emperor's table. It was a large, square, golden seal. The emperor was wearing a dragon robe and a golden crown. He sat behind the table and was reading the documents, jade slips, and memorials on the table. Ji Tianqing followed the imperial tutor into the study and bowed respectfully, "Greetings to the emperor." Only then did the emperor put down the document in his hand and looked at Ji Tianqing with a gentle face. After looking at him for a while and seeing that he had regained his spirit, the emperor nodded slightly and said, "Ji Tianqing, I now give you the Tianshan region lord's golden seal. You must carry this with you in the future." After that, the emperor stood up and handed the golden seal to Ji Tianqing solemnly. Ji Tianqing took the seal with both hands. He felt that the seal was as heavy as a mountain and contained a vast aura that could suppress heaven and earth and encompass all things. The most important thing was that the seal looked brand new. It seemed to have been cast not long ago. The imperial tutor saw him looking at the golden seal in confusion and explained with a smile, "The imperial court did not set up the position of the Tianshan region lord before, so there is no Tianshan region lord's golden seal. This golden seal was cast by the emperor himself. It took him 10 days and a lot of effort. This seal is not only a token of your identity as the Tianshan region lord, but also an extraordinary soul-level magic treasure called the Seal of Mountains and Rivers. If you encounter an accident, this seal can help you block a fatal blow from a soul-refining realm expert. It can save you 3 times in total. You must use it appropriately." After hearing the imperial tutor's explanation, Ji Tianqing suddenly understood. "I see. I didn't expect this Seal of Mountains and Rivers to be a soul-level magic treasure. Thank you very much, Emperor." This was the first time Ji Tianqing had come into contact with a soul-level magic treasure. The most powerful treasure he had come into contact with before was only a soul-level magic treasure. Although he did not know how powerful a soul-level magic treasure was. But this was a magic treasure cast by the emperor himself. How could it be ordinary? The emperor nodded and continued, "Now, the imperial court's edict has been passed down. All the cities in Central State and the 9 regions in the south know about it. In the Tianshan region, the domain lord's mansion has been completed at the location you chose. The garrison troops have also set off and are rushing to the Tianshan region day and night. The guards of honor and the accompanying guards are waiting outside. You will set off today and go to the Tianshan region to take office." Ji Tianqing solemnly put away the Seal of Mountains and Rivers. After bowing to the emperor, he left the study. When he walked out of the palace of heaven and earth, he saw a mighty guard of honor waiting for him in the square in front of the palace. There were about 200 people in the guard of honor. Among them, more than 150 were elite imperial guards who had reached the origin core realm. In the guard, there was a huge golden bird as big as a house. It was the spiritual beast golden-winged bird. On the back of the golden-winged bird, there was a magnificent royal carriage with a canopy covering the top. Thousands of jewels were strung together to form a bead curtain. It looked extremely luxurious. The other 40 or so people in the guard of honor were all young women. They were also beautiful and talented. In addition, there was a guard of 100 people, who were also loyal and brave imperial guards. Of course, after he took office, the guard of honor would return to the imperial court. The guard of 100 people would stay in the domain lord's mansion. They were his private imperial guards. The journey from the imperial court to the Tianshan region was long. It would take a month to travel by spiritual beast. Therefore, the guard of honor and the guard of 300 people had to ride hundreds of spiritual beast birds. Chapter 613. Ji Tianqing didn't waste any time and immediately boarded the royal carriage on the back of the golden-winged bird. Ji Ku, Yan, and Qian Yu all sat with him in the spacious and luxurious royal carriage. More than 40 beauties held various musical instruments and played beautiful music. The guard of honor immediately set off. The guard of honor flew into the sky and majestically flew towards the south. More than 100 guards also rode on spirit birds and followed closely behind the guard of honor. Not long after, Ji Tianqing and the others left the imperial court and soared high in the sky. A middle-aged man with a resolute and dignified face rode on a four-winged flying tiger alone and followed closely to the right of the royal carriage. Ji Tianqing saw that the middle-aged man was wearing a brocade robe and had a dignified bearing. He didn't seem like an ordinary guard, so he asked for his identity. The middle-aged man cupped his hands and bowed to him, replying respectfully, reporting to the domain lord, "Your subordinate Jiang Chen is now your deputy and the commander of the guard team. From now on, if you have any orders, just give the order, and I will do my best to carry them out." Ji Tianqing sized up Jiang Chen a few times before nodding and saying a few words of encouragement. In the following month, the guard of honor flew at full speed and headed straight for the Tianshan region in the south. The journey was long and Ji Tianqing didn't waste any time. He meditated on the royal carriage and silently improved his strength. In the beginning, Ji Ku and Yan were still a little excited. They admired the scenery of the mountains and rivers along the way and talked from time to time. They were finally going to return to the Tianshan region. Their hearts were filled with anticipation and they were still fantasizing about the scene after returning. But after a long time, the two felt bored and lost interest in admiring the scenery. They simply followed Ji Tianqing's example and meditated to cultivate. During the journey, everyone had a smooth journey and didn't encounter any danger. The situation was just as Ji Tianqing had expected. He had set out a mighty guard of honor and represented the dignity of the imperial court. Who would dare to attack him? After a month, Ji Tianqing and the others finally returned to the Tianshan region. At noon on this day, the majestic honor guard entered the ancient star realm. Jiang Chen took the initiative to ask Ji Tianqing for instructions. "Domain Lord, should we go to the newly built Domain Lord Manor first or the Sky Pillar sect?" News of the territorial lord's arrival had already reached the ancient star realm a few days ago. The sect masters of all the major sects have gathered at the Sky Pillar sect, waiting to welcome him. Ji Tianqing thought for a moment, then ordered Jiang Chen, "Then let's go directly to the Sky Pillar sect." Jiang Chen immediately passed down the order, and the entire team flew towards the Sky Pillar sect. After a few months of recuperation, the Sky Pillar sect had returned to its original state. 9 majestic mountain peaks formed the 9-dragon spiritual pulse, which was protected by a powerful mountain protection array. Every mountain peak was overflowing with greenery, and the heavens and the earth were filled with rich spiritual energy. Although it would take at least a few years for the Sky Pillar sect to truly recover its strength, the Sky Pillar sect would still need a few more years. However, with Chu Tianqing and Xiang Wuji in charge, the Sky Pillar sect was still the #1 sect in the ancient star realm, the leader of the 4 major sects. At this moment, in the square in front of the palace on the summit of the Crimson Firmament Peak, several experts and young talents were standing respectfully. Everyone looked at the sky in front of them, as if waiting for something. The leader was a middle-aged man with a head full of white hair. He was tall and sturdy, and his appearance was dignified. He was the sect master of the Sky Pillar sect, Chu Tianqing. Back then, he was injured by the Blood Demon King's reverse Bone Devil Blade. After a few months of recuperation, his injuries had completely healed, and his strength had also recovered. The white-haired old man standing beside him was Grand Elder Xiang Wuji. He wore a purple robe, and he looked dignified without being angry. Behind the two of them were 3 experts and 3 young talents. They were the sect masters and chief disciples of the 3 major sections. Sect Master Qi of the Pill Cauldron sect, Sect Master Yen of the 6 Harmony sect, and Granny Shueiyue of the Heart Moon sect stood side by side. The chief disciples of the 3 major sects stood behind the 3 sect masters. At this moment, Sect Master Qi frowned and said in a low voice, "Everyone, we've been standing here for half a day. Why hasn't the new territorial lord come yet? Do you think he won't come today?" Sect Master Yen said with a solemn expression, Sect Master Qi, the new territorial lord has arrived. No matter what, we have to welcome him. Whether the territorial lord comes today or not, we have to wait here. We can't be negligent or disrespectful. Granny Shueiyue frowned and thought for a moment. She looked at Chu Tianxing and asked tentatively, Sect Master Chu, the imperial court's decree said that the new territorial lord is called Ji Tianxing. I've been wondering, is the new territorial lord Chu's personal disciple, or is it a coincidence that he has the same name? Hearing Granny Shueiyue's question, Feng Min, Wu Yu, and the chief disciple of the Pill Cauldron sect all listened attentively, waiting for Chu Tianxing's answer. Chu Tianxing said calmly, I haven't received a letter from Tianxing, so I can't be sure if the new territorial lord is him. Sect Master Qi quickly shook his head and smiled. Granny Shueiyue, is there a need to guess? It must be a coincidence that he has the same name. Sect Master Chu's personal disciple, Ji Tianxing, has only left the sect for a few months. How could he become a Sky Origin Stage elite, defeat all the geniuses of the Middle State, and become the territorial lord of the Tianshan region? In the entire Tianxian continent, you can't find such a heaven-defying genius. Sect Master Yen also nodded in agreement and said seriously, according to the news from the Middle State, the new territorial lord defeated a Sky Origin Stage 6 genius, and even tied with a Sky Origin Stage 7 expert. Although Sect Master Chu's personal disciple is a genius, he can't be so monstrous. He has only left the Tianshan region for a few months. It's already a miracle that he can break through to the first level of Sky Origin Stage. This new territorial lord most likely has the same name as Sect Master Chu's personal disciple. After all, there are hundreds of millions of people in our clan, and there are many people with the same name. Just as everyone was discussing in low voices, the sky in front of them suddenly lit up with colorful brilliance, and there was a burst of music. He's here. The new territorial lord has arrived. The few sect masters immediately stopped discussing and looked at the sky in front of them respectfully with their eyes wide open. After a while, a majestic guard of honor galloped from the sky in the distance. The troop was huge, and there were 200 people in the guard of honor. All of them were riding on spiritual birds, and there were many fairy-like beauties playing music. On both sides of the guard of honor, there were hundreds of guards in silver armor. They were all experts with powerful auras. In the sacred and majestic troop, there was an extraordinary golden-winged bird. It carried a magnificent royal carriage, showing an incomparably noble aura. Seeing this scene, the few sect masters immediately recalled the scene of the emperor's arrival. The new territorial lord's guard of honor and power was not inferior to the emperor of the imperial court. It made everyone feel a strong sense of respect. After a while, the guard of honor of the new territorial lord arrived above the Crimson Cloud Peak and slowly landed on the square in front of the palace. Chu Tianxing immediately led everyone to bow and pay their respects to the luxurious royal carriage. We welcome the arrival of the territorial lord. Everyone bowed, lowered their heads, and bowed their hands. Their postures were respectful, and they did not dare to look up at the scene in the royal carriage. In the royal carriage, a young man's voice sounded. It was calm and majestic. Everyone, please rise. Following this voice, a handsome young man wearing a white robe walked out from the jade carriage and arrived at the square with majestic strides. Chu Tianxing and the others raised their heads and looked at the new territorial lord who walked out of the jade carriage. When everyone saw the appearance of the territorial lord, they suddenly trembled and widened their eyes in disbelief. Tian Xing. It's really you. Chu Tianxing's face was full of surprise, and his eyes were filled with disbelief and surprise. The expressions of the three sect masters also became very interesting. They were all shocked and stunned. Chapter 614. Ji Tianxing. It's you. You're the new region leader. How is that possible? Sect leader Qi and sect leader Yan were stunned for a long time before they came back to their senses and exclaimed in disbelief. Just now, everyone was still discussing. The two of them swore that the new region leader and Ji Tianqing had the same name. But now, a miracle had happened. The peerless genius who was famous in Central State and had crushed all the geniuses was really Chu Tianqing's direct disciple. He was the Ji Tianqing that they knew. How could they not be inexplicably shocked? Not only were the three sect leaders shocked, but the three chief disciples were also stunned. They could not believe their eyes. Especially Feng Min and Wu Yu, who were the most affected. The shock in their hearts could not be described with words. A few months ago, the two of them had fought side by side with Ji Tianqing and destroyed the demon clan's stronghold. Now, they were still the same. They were still the chief disciples of the Heart Moon sect and the Six Unity sect. Ji Tianqing had become the noble emperor, the peerless genius who was famous in Central State, and the overlord of Tianshan region. Back then, they were all geniuses of equal status. Now, the difference between their status and Ji Tianqing's was like the difference between clouds and mud. Ji Tianqing's status was too noble, and his halo was too dazzling. They could only look up to him and worship him. Just as everyone was shocked and still in a daze, Ji Tianqing stepped in front of Chu Tianqing. He smiled and bowed to Chu Tianqing. He said respectfully, "Master, I'm back." Chu Tianqing quickly reached out to hold his arms. He shook his head and said, "Tianqing, you can't do this. Now that you're the region leader, how can you bow to your subordinate?" As the region leader, Ji Tianqing was in charge of every inch of land in Tianshan region. Everyone in the Tianshan region, no matter who they were, was his subordinate. However, Ji Tianqing shook his head and said seriously, "Master, although I am the territory lord of the Tianshan region, I am also your disciple. I cannot abandon the relationship between master and disciple." Hearing this, Chu Tianqing was filled with gratification and excitement. He felt that he could die without regrets having such a disciple in this life. The three sect leaders were filled with emotions. They were both envious and jealous of Chu Tianqing. Xiang Wuji stroked his beard and revealed a gratified and excited expression. He smiled and nodded, "Good. This is great. Tianqing, you're in a high position now, but you're neither arrogant nor rash. You still respect your master and Tao. You're simply a role model for all martial artists in the world." Ji Tianqing also cupped his hands in greeting and said with a smile, "Old master, this disciple has come to visit you." Xiang Wuji's expression changed. He took a few steps back and waved his hand. "Don't. This was unacceptable. You are the heavenly stellar region lord, but I am not your master. How can you bow to me? Wouldn't that be too much for this old man?" Ji Tianqing and Chu Tianqing both smiled and looked at Xiang Wuji playfully. It was obvious that although Xiang Wuji spoke casually, when Ji Tianqing bowed to him, he was flattered and found it hard to accept. Then, Ji Ku and Yan Er walked to the side of the crowd and bowed to Chu Tianqing and Xiang Wuji. Everyone chatted with each other and they were all very excited. "Master, this is not the place to talk. Let's go back to the towering sky palace and talk." Ji Tianqing chatted with everyone for a while. Then, he led the crowd through the square and into the towering sky palace. Chu Tianqing, Xiang Wuji, and Ji Ku quickly followed and entered the towering sky palace with smiles on their faces. As for the people from the three sects, they were completely ignored and left on the side. Although the three sect leaders were embarrassed, they did not dare to have any disrespectful thoughts and quickly followed into the palace. Ji Tianqing sat at the head of the table. Everyone sat on both sides of the palace and reported the situation to Ji Tianqing. Especially Chu Tianqing and Xiang Wuji, they were the most excited and surprised today. The two of them told Ji Tianqing about the recent situation of the Towering Sky Sect and the Star Ancient Realm in detail. After listening to the two of them, Ji Tianqing finally understood the situation in the Star Ancient Realm. He said bluntly in front of everyone, the Demon Emperor has already escaped from the Tianshan region and is fleeing to the northern desert. The Monarch Mansion has been secretly investigating the Demon Emperor's whereabouts. Soon, when the Monarch Mansion finds the Demon Emperor's whereabouts, they will take action and completely eliminate the Demon Emperor. The situation in the Tianshan region has stabilized. The Towering Sky sect also needs to develop quickly and recover as soon as possible. In the future, I will not stay in the Tianshan region. I will return to the central province to cultivate. At that time, the Tianshan region situation will still be managed by the Towering Sky sect. Sect leader master will have to work hard. Ji Tianqing's words were to announce to everyone that the Tianshan region would still be managed by the Towering Sky sect. He wanted to be a hands-off manager. He would only appear when something big happened in the Tianshan region. When the sect leaders of the three major sects heard this, they were surprised and jealous. However, they did not dare to raise any objections. Originally, sect leader Qi and sect leader Yan thought that the situation in the Star Ancient Realm had changed. They had a chance to compete with the Towering Sky sect and even compete for the position of the #1 sect. However, now that Ji Tianqing had become the Tianshan region lord, they no longer had the slightest chance. After the disaster, not only would the Towering Sky sect not weaken, but it would also glow with even more dazzling brilliance and become even more powerful. Next, Ji Tianqing gave a few more orders to everyone and had a private conversation with Chu Tianqing and Xian Wuji for a while. 4 hours later, Ji Tianqing left the Towering Sky sect with the honor guard and headed to the Domain Lord Mansion. When the Imperial Court built the Domain Lord Mansion, it was built in the place he chose according to his decision. The Domain Lord Mansion was in the Star Ancient Realm. It was located in a mountain range with abundant spiritual qi and was only 600 miles away from the Towering Sky sect. The mountain range was named the Tianqing Mountain Range. It had a radius of 300 miles. The experts of the Imperial Court used formations to arrange the 300 miles of mountains and rivers into a huge formation, forming a super spirit vein. In the center of the spiritual vein was a mountain that was nearly 10,000 meters high. The Domain Lord Mansion was built on the peak of the mountain. When Ji Tianqing arrived at the Domain Lord Mansion, he was also shocked by the imposing aura of the mountain and the magnificent palace. Above the 10,000-meter-tall peak was a boundless sea of white clouds. In the sea of clouds stood a group of palaces with a radius of 20 miles. There were jade palaces, pavilions, terraces, and even magnificent palaces. The setting sun shone on the Domain Lord Mansion, causing golden clouds to appear in the sea of clouds. The entire Domain Lord Mansion was covered with a layer of sacred golden light. It was as ethereal and sacred as an immortal cave. The Imperial Court had built the Domain Lord Mansion for him. It was more magnificent and luxurious than his cave in the Imperial King Mansion. After Ji Tianqing entered the Domain Lord Mansion, he asked the honor guard and guards to leave to rest. He took Ji Ku and Qian Yu to wander around the mansion and enjoy the beautiful scenery. The Domain Lord Mansion was so big that it would not be crowded even if there were tens of thousands of people living in it. If they were to stroll around leisurely, it would take them at least a day. Such a rare residence that was like a heavenly palace would be his private mansion in the future. Chapter 6:15. The Imperial Court had already arranged everything in the Domain Chief's manner. Ji Tianqing did not need to worry about it anymore. He strolled around the mansion and only returned to the study at night. The guard commander, Jiang Chen, rushed to the study and reported the situation to him respectfully. "My lord, the 100,000 soldiers of the garrison army have arrived in the ancient Star Realm. They are stationed in the Tianfeng Plains and are waiting for your orders. In addition, everything in the Domain Chief's manor has been arranged properly. Currently, there were over 1,000 servants and odd job workers, 300 maids, and 200 guards in the mansion. The guards under my command are not included in this list. They will follow you and protect you from now on. Ji Tianqing listened to Jiang Chen's report and pondered for a moment. He then gave a series of instructions. He did not need to worry about the trivial matters of the domain chief's manor. Jiang Chen and the steward appointed by the imperial court would take care of it. With the prestige and defensive power of the domain chief's manor, no one would dare to invade. Moreover, there were dozens of Tianyuan formations inside and outside the domain chief's manor. It was also protected by a soul-grade formation. The domain chief's manor was definitely the safest place in the Tianqin domain. No one could sneak in unless they were attacked by a soul-refining expert. As for the 100,000 soldiers of the garrison army, they were all brave and skilled in battle. The army of a mortal kingdom could not be compared to them. Ji Tianqing divided the 100,000 soldiers into 5 legions. 4 of them were sent to guard the 4 borders of the Tianqin domain. The 5th legion was stationed in the ancient star realm. They were ready to respond at any time. The problem of how to support the 100,000 soldiers and the domain chief's manor was very simple. The 10 countries and hundreds of martial arts sects in the Tianqin domain had to pay a certain amount of taxes to the domain chief's manor every year. This was a shocking amount of wealth that was enough to support hundreds of thousands of people. In the next few days, Ji Tianqing stayed in the domain chief's manor to fulfill the duties of the domain chief and deal with a lot of official business. Although he had become an overlord at the age of 18, it was the first time he dealt with such an important matter. However, he was able to deal with any situation calmly analyze, and think wisely before finally making a decision. Moreover, the imperial court had already considered this problem. They had assigned 2 military counselors to help him come up with plans. In this way, he would be able to handle official business with ease. Unknowingly, 3 days had passed. On the morning of the 4th day, Jiang Chen came to report the situation to him. Reporting to the domain lord, the decree has been sent to the Royal Azure Kingdom. You can depart at any time. Ji Tianqing immediately ordered, pass down the order, we are to return to the Royal Azure Dynasty immediately. I've already left Clear Sky Kingdom for a full year, it's time for me to go back and visit my father. Jiang Chen cupped his fists and said sincerely, when my lord returns to the Royal Azure Kingdom, the entire Royal Azure Kingdom will respectfully welcome your arrival. My lord, this is truly a return to your hometown in glory. Ji Tianqing smiled and led Jiang Chen out of the study, heading towards the square in the manor. In the square, the guards of honor and the guards had already finished their preparations. After Ji Tianqing and Ji Ke boarded the royal carriage, the entourage set off on their journey. They left the domain chief's manor and rushed towards the Qingyun kingdom. A year ago, Ji Tianqing and Ji Ke had left the Green Cloud Imperial City and rushed to the Star Ancient Realm in a carriage. At that time, the 2 of them took nearly a month to enter the Sky Pillar sect in the Star Ancient Realm. Today, Ji Tianqing's guards of honor only took 12 hours to cross thousands of miles of mountains and rivers and arrived at the Royal Azure Dynasty. In the evening, the sun was setting. The guards of honor were about to enter the Royal Azure Dynasty Imperial City. Ji Tianqing sat in the royal carriage, looking down at the land in front of him. Looking at the ancient imperial city, his heart was filled with many emotions. Thinking back to when he was in the Royal Azure Dynasty Imperial City, he was persecuted by Ling Yunfei and Ji Ling. He was reduced to a good-for-nothing young master who was ridiculed by the people in the city. Fortunately, Kenshin's tomb appeared, allowing him to inherit Kenshin's lost skills and embark on a strange and unique path of swordsmanship. It allowed him to recover his strength and reclaim the qualification to enter the Sky Pillar sect. After he entered the Sky Pillar sect, he went through hundreds of hardships and tribulations before he finally stood out and became the emperor whose name shook the central state. Recalling the past, everything was still vivid in his mind. In this short span of a year, Ji Tianqing went from being a good-for-nothing young master who was humiliated in the past to being the overlord of the Sky Pillar region. Such a heaven-defying change was like a mud worm turning into a divine dragon. It was unreal when one recalled it. Under the setting sun, outside the majestic city gates of the royal Azure Dynasty Imperial City, 300 armored and armed royal guards stood on both sides of the main road outside the city gates respectfully, showing a dignified and solemn aura. On the wide and straight Bluestone Avenue, the royal Azure Dynasty Emperor led the civil and military officials to stand in silence, quietly waiting for their arrival. There were hundreds of people present, but no one dared to make a noise or even whisper. Everyone knew that the Honorable Territorial Lord would be arriving at the Royal Azure Dynasty Imperial City today. The Royal Azure Dynasty Emperor and the civil and military officials were puzzled. Why did the newly appointed Territorial Lord want to inspect the Royal Azure Dynasty Imperial City? Among the 10 countries in the Sky Pillar region, the Royal Azure Dynasty Imperial City was ranked at the bottom. There was nothing outstanding about it that was worthy of the Territorial Lord's personal inspection. Therefore, the Royal Azure Dynasty Emperor was a little nervous and thought to himself, could it be that the Territorial Lord has just taken office and urgently needs to establish his authority, so he wants to start with the Royal Azure Dynasty Imperial City? However, no matter how worried and anxious he was, after receiving the order, he had no choice but to go out of the city to welcome the Territorial Lord. Just as everyone was waiting anxiously, a colorful glow appeared in the sky in front of them, accompanied by waves of beautiful music. The Royal Azure Dynasty Emperor and the civil and military officials were immediately energized, revealing a look of anticipation and awe as they looked at the colorful glow in the sky. In the blink of an eye, a majestic guard of honor flew from the sky and slowly landed on the plains outside the city. The hundreds of people in the Guard of Honor all exuded a powerful and dignified aura. They were riding on spiritual birds that the officials had never seen before, appearing very mysterious and powerful. Even the more than 40 maidservants playing the musical instruments in the Guard of Honor were like fairies who had descended from the heavens in the eyes of the civil and military officials. As for the luxurious jade carriage on the back of the golden-winged bird, it was extremely dazzling, like the carriage of the gods. Not only were the civil and military officials and the royal guards filled with fear, even the Royal Azure Dynasty Emperor was extremely respectful towards the Territorial Lord in the royal carriage. Your subject welcomes the arrival of the Territorial Lord in person. When the Guard of Honor landed, the Royal Azure Dynasty Emperor immediately knelt on the ground and bowed respectfully. Behind him, the civil and military officials and the 300 royal guards also knelt in unison and kowtowed with a very sincere expression. However, the Territorial Lord in the royal carriage did not speak, nor did he show his face. The majestic Guard of Honor stepped onto the Bluestone Road and headed straight for the Imperial City gates. Chapter 6:16. The new Territorial Lord did not speak nor did he show his face. After arriving at the Royal Azure City, the Guard of Honor immediately entered the city. The Royal Azure Emperor and the civil and military officials felt uneasy and could only follow closely behind the Guard of Honor. Everyone prayed silently in their hearts that the Territorial Lord would not make things difficult for the Royal Azure Kingdom. After all, the Territorial Lord only needed to say one word to decide the fate of the Royal Azure Kingdom and the survival of the Royal Azure Kingdom. After the Guard of Honor entered the city, they went straight to the center of the city. The citizens of the city came out to greet the Emperor and knelt on both sides of the road. When the Guard of Honor passed by, the citizens hurriedly kowtowed in salute. The Royal Azure Emperor thought that the Guard of Honor was going to the palace, so he had already sent people back to the palace to greet the Emperor. However, when the Guard of Honor reached the city square, they turned and walked towards the south side of the city. The Royal Azure Emperor and the officials were dumbfounded. They did not understand what this meant and could not guess where the Territorial Lord was going. Helpless, the Royal Azure Emperor and the officials could only follow the Guard of Honor to the south side of the city. After a quarter of an hour, the Guard of Honor arrived at the gates of the G Mansion and stopped. The Royal Azure Emperor and the officials were stunned. They did not understand what the territorial lord was going to do. Why did he not go to the palace but came to the Ji mansion? Could it be that the territorial lord was acquainted with the Ji family? Or was there some connection? Thinking of this, the royal Azure Emperor was filled with doubt and anticipation. He stared at the royal carriage and the Ji mansion's gates with wide eyes. When had the guards of the Ji mansion ever seen such a sacred and majestic parade? Even if it was only the royal Azure Emperor, the guards would still have to greet him in fear and trepidation. At this moment, the guard of honor stopped in front of the Ji mansion's gates. There were at least 300 of them and their grandeur was extremely grand. Behind the guard of honor, the royal Azure dynasty emperor and his court officials stood respectfully, as if they were servants following the emperor. What kind of awe-inspiring and majestic parade was this? The guards at the gates were stunned. When they regained their senses, they rushed into the Ji mansion and reported the news to the master. Not long after, the entire Ji mansion was alarmed. Everyone was inexplicably shocked, and in fear and trepidation, they hurried to the gate to greet the emperor. The juniors and maids of the Ji family were all kneeling on the square in front of the palace, waiting for the arrival of the big shot. The patriarch, Ji Changkong, was still able to maintain his calm. He quickly led a few people in charge to the entrance. After arriving at the entrance, when Ji Changkong and the others clearly saw the formation outside the door, their expressions changed drastically. At this moment, the royal Azure dynasty emperor was afraid that the Ji family would neglect the territorial lord, so he quickly reminded them in a dignified voice, "Ji Changkong, what are you waiting for? Quickly come and welcome the new region lord." Domain lord? Hearing these words, Ji Changkong and the other leaders trembled in confusion and shock. They couldn't understand why the honorable domain lord would suddenly grace the Ji mansion with his presence. Several leaders hurriedly knelt on both sides of the door, lowering their heads in fear and trepidation, not daring to raise their heads to look at the domain lord's royal carriage. With their status, daring to raise their heads to look was a disrespect to the domain lord, a crime punishable by death. Only the patriarch, Ji Changkong, remained standing. He quickly walked towards the guard of honor, with a respectful attitude, and was about to immediately bow. However, just as he was about to bow, a handsome and valiant young man in a white robe flew out from the imperial carriage. Swoosh! No one saw the white-robed young man's movements clearly. They only saw a flash of white light, and the white-robed young man covered a distance of 10 steps and landed in front of Ji Changkong. "Father! Please rise, how can I accept such a grand gesture?" The white-robed young man quickly reached out to hold Ji Changkong's arms. His handsome face was filled with concern, and his voice contained a trace of excitement. Ji Changkong was stunned. His eyes were fixed on the white-robed young man in front of him, and he was immediately dumbfounded. He couldn't believe that the legendary peerless genius, the honorable Tianqian region lord, was actually his son, Ji Tianqing. No matter how calm and collected Ji Changkong was, he couldn't regain his senses at this moment, and couldn't say a word. Not only Ji Changkong, but everyone else was also stunned. They were so shocked that their mouths were agape, but they couldn't make a sound. Although there were hundreds of people outside the Ji mansion, it was so quiet that even the sound of a pin dropping could be heard. The leaders of the Ji family were stunned. The royal Azure dynasty emperor was dumbfounded. All the civil and military officials were dumbstruck. Their minds went blank. No one could believe that the sacred and dignified region lord was actually the eldest son of the Ji family, Ji Tianqing. Although there were some officials who didn't know Ji Tianqing. But Ji Tianqing addressed Ji Changkong as his father, and this was enough to prove his identity. At this moment, hundreds of people were collectively dumbfounded. Their minds were blank, and they had completely lost the ability to think and speak. In everyone's hearts, the eldest young master of the Ji family, Ji Tianqing, was once a good-for-nothing young master whose cultivation was crippled. Even if he had a fortuitous encounter and successfully entered the Sky Pillar sect, he was now just an ordinary cultivator with some talent. But this extraordinary white-robed young man in front of them was a world-renowned peerless genius, the incomparably honorable Regent Lord of the Tianqian region, the overlord of the 10 nations. No one could connect that ordinary young master of the Ji family with this sacred and honorable Regent Lord in front of them. This was simply like a legend, too exaggerated and outrageous. Everyone was stunned for a long time. Ji Changkong was the first to regain his senses. His hands tightly held onto Ji Tianqing's arm, and his face flushed with excitement as his entire body trembled. Tianqing. You are actually, the Regent Lord of the Tianqian region. No matter how calm Ji Changkong was, he was so excited that his blood was boiling, and he stuttered. It couldn't be helped, the shock and surprise this matter gave him was simply too great. Even now, he still felt like he was in a dream as he held on to Ji Tianqing's arm with both hands. It was very unreal. Ji Tianqing supported his father and nodded with a smile on his face. He bowed respectfully and said, "Father, I am unfilial. I have been away from home for a year before returning to visit you. In order to make up for my mistakes, I did not even go to the palace when I returned to the royal Azure dynasty. I came home to pay my respects to you first." Ji Changkong was so emotional that tears streamed down his face. He could only nod heavily, unable to say another word. The royal Azure dynasty emperor and the civil and military officials finally regained their senses. Their hearts were filled with extreme shock. Suddenly, a few muffled thuds could be heard from the originally quiet procession. Some of the officials who had offended the Ji family or had grievances with them were scared half to death on the spot. Their bodies trembled like a sieve. A few people with weaker psychological endurance fainted on the spot. Their vision turned black and they fell to the ground, unconscious. After all, no matter how powerful these people were in the royal Azure dynasty, in front of the sacred Regent Lord, they were like ants in the grass. The Regent Lord only needed to say one word to turn them all into ashes. Even the royal Azure dynasty emperor did not dare to protect them. Chapter 6:17. Outside the gates of the Ji mansion, the atmosphere was very strange. The royal Azure emperor and the civil and military officials forcefully suppressed the shock and horror in their hearts. They gritted their teeth and dared not make a single sound. If they disturbed the conversation between the territorial lord and his father, they would be beheaded no matter how many heads they had. No one dared to question the territorial lord's authority. Even the royal Azure emperor did not dare to show the slightest disrespect. After all, the strongest person in the royal Azure kingdom, Ji Shenshao, was only at the Yuan Dan stage. On the other hand, the territorial lord's guards added up to a total of 300 people. All of them were Yuan Dan stage experts. Even a few maidservants who played the zither could kill all the civil and military officials present at the scene. Moreover, the territorial lord was a legendary divine realm expert. He even had 100,000 garrison troops under his command. In the face of the territorial lord, everyone was but an ant. Finally, Ji Tianqing exchanged a few words with his father. When Ji Changkong had calmed down, he smiled and said, "Father, this is not the place to talk. Let's go home and talk." All right. Let's go home." Ji Changkong lifted his sleeve to wipe away the tears at the corner of his eyes. He smiled emotionally and pulled Ji Tianqing towards the gates of the Ji mansion. The father and son pair completely ignored the royal Azure emperor and the civil and military officials. They did not need to put anyone in their eyes. On the other hand, the royal Azure emperor and the officials did not dare to complain. When Ji Tianqing helped his father through the gates, Jiang Chen used his spiritual sense to communicate with Ji Tianqing. "My lord, there are so many people blocking the gates. I'm afraid it's a little inappropriate. What do you think?" Only then did Ji Tianqing stop in his tracks. He turned his head to look at the royal Azure dynasty emperor and the civil and military officials before he said nonchalantly, all of you can return to the imperial palace and wait. I'll be there in 2 days. Hearing his words, the royal Azure Emperor and the civil and military officials looked as if they had been pardoned from a great burden. Under the emperor's lead, the officials bowed and left. As for the territorial lords' guards, they followed Ji Tianqing into the Ji mansion in a single file. They remained in the square in front of the palace to await orders. On the left and right sides of the square, all the family members, children, servants, and guards of the Ji mansion were kneeling. When Ji Tianqing and Ji Changkong walked side by side, everyone respectfully prostrated themselves on the ground and repeatedly kowtowed. It wasn't until the father and son left the square and returned to the conference hall that the crowd dared to raise their heads. Everyone in the Ji clan was dumbfounded. Many of them kneeled on the ground in a daze and even forgot to get up. No one could believe that the young master from a year ago had suddenly become the domain lord of the heavenly stellar region. The difference between the two identities was like the difference between a rock on the ground and the stars in the sky. Even the folklore passed down from generation to generation didn't have such an exaggerated and bizarre story. Ji Tianqing and his father sat at the head of the table in the Ji clan's main hall. Originally, Ji Tianqing wanted Ji Changkong to sit at the head of the table while he sat at the lower end. But how could Ji Changkong agree? He insisted on pulling Ji Tianqing to sit beside him so that he could feel at ease. After all, Ji Tianqing's status as the domain lord of the heavenly stellar region was so noble that it was frightening. The few leaders didn't dare to sit down. They all stood respectfully in the main hall and listened to the father and son talk. Ji Tianqing asked his father if there were any changes in the imperial city and the Ji clan in the year that he left. Ji Changkong thought for a moment before replying in a low voice, "The imperial city hasn't changed much. It's still the same as before. However, our Ji clan's foundation has been damaged. This year, we've been biding our time and recovering in a low-key manner. At first, the Ling clan wantonly attacked the Ji clan. But later, the clan master Ling Sihai mysteriously disappeared. Problems arose within the Ling clan. For the sake of fighting for power, there was internal strife. Now, the Ling clan is torn apart and no longer a threat. However, although the Ling clan stopped attacking the Ji clan, some other noble clans took the opportunity to invade the Ji clan's properties and suppress our power. Ji Tianqing didn't feel angry or worried. He chuckled and waved his hand, "Father, you don't have to worry. The Ling clan and those who secretly attacked our Ji clan will be destroyed soon. As long as the emperor isn't a fool, he'll know what to do. If I'm not wrong, he must be issuing orders now to send out a large number of people to eliminate the Ling clan and those who attacked our Ji clan." Ji Changkong was stunned for a moment before he smiled with relief and nodded, "That's right. Tianqing, with your current status, you don't even need to issue orders. The emperor will take the initiative to help the Ji clan eliminate all enemies and threats." The emperor is worried that he'll be implicated by those noble clans and suffer your wrath." Ji Changkong had never had things go as smoothly as they did at this moment. Before Ji Tianqing returned home, the Ji clan was still in a precarious situation. Danger lurked everywhere and there were many forces who coveted and spied on them. Today, the Ji clan didn't need to do anything and the emperor would eliminate all enemies for the Ji clan to win Ji Tianqing's favor and show his loyalty to Ji Tianqing. Never in his wildest dreams did Ji Changkong imagine that he would be in such a situation today. At this moment, Ji Tianqing continued, "Father, I've returned not only to visit you but also to bring you to the domain lord's manor. Moreover, I want to help you completely remove the hidden injuries in your body that have been hidden for a long time." Ji Changkong frowned and said reluctantly, "Tianqing, our Ji clan has developed for 100 years to achieve today's power and properties. It's a pity to give them up just like that." Ji Tianqing shook his head and smiled, "Father, I'm now the Tianqin domain lord. The entire Tianqin domain is mine. The 10 major countries, 100 major sects and hundreds of millions of people are all my people. What's there to miss about the Ji clan's properties and power? Once you've moved into the domain lord's manor, you'll be able to live like an immortal. You'll be able to prolong your life and pursue a higher realm of martial arts. Why would you miss the worldly things? Ji Changkong had poured half his life's effort into the Ji clan's development today. Of course, he was reluctant to give up all of a sudden. However, after listening to Ji Tianqing's persuasion, he pondered for a moment and nodded his head in agreement. Good. Tianqing, you're now the Tianqian domain lord. Although your status is unparalleled, you'll definitely be attacked and retaliated against by countless experts and forces. As your father, although I can't help you much, I can't drag you down. Only when I've moved into the domain lord's manor can you have no worries and continue to pursue a higher realm of martial arts. Indeed, if Ji Tianqing's enemies found out that his father was a commoner of the Qingyun kingdom, they would most likely capture his father and use him as a hostage. Ji Changkong was calm and wise. Of course, he had thought of this, so he agreed without hesitation. This was because he knew that Ji Tianqing's future achievements would be even greater. He would not just be the Tianqian domain lord. Chapter 618. Although Ji Changkong had decided to leave the Royal Azure Kingdom for the Domain Chief's manor, the Domain Chief's manor was huge. It would take him a few days to deal with the aftermath of the Ji family's business. Over the next few days, Ji Changkong was busy preparing for his trip to the Domain Chief's manor. Ji Tianqing stayed at home for 2 days and received various reports from Jiang Chen. Just as he expected, the Royal Azure Kingdom's emperor issued the order as soon as possible. In just 2 days, the Ling family's remnants were completely annihilated. Those aristocratic families and forces that were against the Ji family were also annihilated by the Royal Azure Kingdom's emperor. In these 2 days, the news of the Domain Chief's arrival in the Royal Azure Kingdom spread throughout the Royal Azure Kingdom. The entire Royal Azure Kingdom's people knew that the Honorable Domain Chief was actually the young master of the Ji family, the trash that was once ridiculed by countless people. For a moment, the entire kingdom was shocked. Hundreds of millions of people were inexplicably shocked. It was as if they had heard a legend and were discussing it endlessly. There was no doubt that the new domain chief, Ji Tianqing, would be the topic of discussion for a long time to come. That night, in the Royal Azure Kingdom's palace. The Royal Azure Kingdom's emperor was sitting at the table in the imperial study, handling official business. On the table, there was an incense burner emitting spirals of smoke, a gemstone lamp and a thick stack of memorials. In the past few days, the Royal Azure Kingdom's emperor had put in a lot of effort to eradicate the remnants of the Ling family and those forces that were against the Ji family. After all, those forces that dared to go against the Ji family were all aristocratic families with high status in the Royal Azure Kingdom. He suddenly issued an order to avenge the Ji family and carry out a purge within the kingdom. Of course, this would hurt the foundation of the Royal Azure Kingdom and cause unrest within the kingdom for a period of time. However, the Royal Azure Kingdom's emperor could only do so. Otherwise, if the domain chief personally took revenge, the Royal Azure Kingdom would be in turmoil for more than a few days. Thinking of this, the Royal Azure Kingdom's emperor could not help but rub his brows. At this moment, a pretty girl dressed in palace attire pushed open the door and entered the imperial study. Ku greets father. The pretty girl was Ji Ku. She walked to the table and bowed to the Royal Azure Kingdom's emperor. The Royal Azure Kingdom's emperor put down the memorials in his hand and smiled amiably. He nodded and said, "Ku, get up. It's already late at night, why aren't you asleep yet? What business do you have with Imperial Father?" Ji Ku hesitated for a moment before he gathered his courage and said, "Imperial Father, did you receive the letter I sent you 2 months ago?" "That letter?" The Royal Azure Dynasty Emperor frowned and the smile on his face faded. He was silent for a moment before he asked in a low voice, "Ku, you came to find Father tonight to ask about your background, right?" Ji Ku nodded and said solemnly, "Imperial Father, in Ku's heart, you will always be the father who loves me the most. But now that Ku has grown up, I want to know the truth. I hope father can tell Ku. Ku had gradually accepted his identity as a member of the Golden Raccoon tribe. However, she still needed to clarify with the Royal Azure Dynasty Emperor and thoroughly verify this matter before she could feel at ease. The Royal Azure Dynasty Emperor nodded slightly and looked at her calmly. He then said in a deep voice, Ku, the matter you mentioned in the letter is indeed true. Although I don't understand how you found out about this matter, since you asked, I'll tell you. That year, Imperial Father and noble consort Ning went to Guangling Temple to burn incense and pray that the heavens would bless noble consort Ning so that she could bear a dragon seed. When they left Guangling Temple, a huge koi fish suddenly appeared in the river at the foot of the mountain. The Royal Azure Dynasty Emperor recounted the incident from beginning to end. The whole process was exactly the same as what Ku knew. After listening to the Royal Azure Dynasty Emperor's account, the knot in Ku's heart was finally untied and she secretly breathed a sigh of relief. At this moment, the Royal Azure Dynasty Emperor took out a dark gold pendant from the storage pouch at his waist. The pendant was only the size of a fingernail and its appearance was that of a delicate little lock. It was strung together by a silver bead chain and exuded a mysterious and ancient aura. The Royal Azure Dynasty Emperor held the golden pendant in his hand and handed it to Ku. When Imperial Father picked you up that year, this pendant was wrapped around your wrist. It must be some kind of special keepsake and it must be related to your birth. Now that you know about your birth and what happened that year, if you want to find your birth parents, you can use this as a clue to find them. Whether you find your birth parents or not, Imperial Father will always see you as his own daughter and the Royal Azure Dynasty will always be your home. Hearing the heavy and sincere tone of the Royal Azure Dynasty Emperor, Ku's heart was filled with warmth and her eyes were faintly covered with a layer of mist. She pursed her lips tightly and nodded. She kept the golden lock-shaped pendant and bowed, "Thank you, Imperial Father." After that, she bowed to the Royal Azure Dynasty Emperor and left the study. On the morning of the third day, Tianqing left the residence and brought Jiang Chen and the guards to the Imperial Palace. When he arrived at the Imperial Palace gates, the Royal Azure Dynasty Emperor who had already received the news hurriedly led the civil and military officials and the Imperial Guards to the Imperial Palace gates to welcome him. After everyone paid their respects, they clustered around Tianqing like stars surrounding the moon and entered the Imperial Palace Grand Hall. Tianqing carried out the authority and duties of the territorial lord. He sat on the emperor's throne and listened to the Royal Azure Dynasty Emperor and the officials of the 6 departments report on the state of the country. After everyone had finished their report, Tianqing pondered for a moment and issued a few orders for the Royal Azure Dynasty Emperor to carry out. These orders were related to the national economy and the people's livelihood. They played a decisive role in the fate and future of the Royal Azure Dynasty. The Royal Azure Dynasty Emperor was a man of great foresight. He understood Tianqing's intentions and immediately thanked him profusely. Tianqing stayed in the Imperial Palace for half a day. After dealing with the state affairs and official affairs, he then left the Imperial Palace with Ku. After that, the two of them returned to the residence to wait for Changkong to deal with the aftermath. The Royal Azure Dynasty Kingdom was still bustling with noise and excitement. The nobles and aristocrats were still restless and uneasy. The people were still talking endlessly, immersed in the excitement of the territorial lord's arrival. Unknowingly, 6 days had passed in the blink of an eye. Changkong had finally finished dealing with the family's properties and exchanged them for cultivation resources and wealth. Most of the people in the residence were dismissed by him. Only a few hundred people who were loyal and trustworthy were left behind to follow him to the territorial lord's manor. Among these people, there were not only the family's family members and descendants but also the loyal stewards, guards, and servants of the family. On the morning of the 7th day, Tianqing's ceremonial guards departed. He led Ji Changkong and a few hundred Ji family members out of the royal Azure dynasty and rushed to the territorial lord's manor in the ancient stellar realm. Chapter 6:19. Hundreds of huge flying birds carrying nearly 400 people were galloping through the sky. After a day of flying, Ji Tianqing and the others returned to the domain chief's manor at nightfall. When Ji Changkong and the hundreds of Ji family members saw the domain chief's manor on the top of the mountain, they were stunned. They simply couldn't believe that someone could actually build a palace on such a towering mountain. This was simply inconceivable. The domain chief's manor covered an area of 20 square miles. There were rows upon rows of houses and magnificent palaces. It was like a heavenly palace, the residence of the gods. Ji Changkong had to admit that the environment of the domain chief's manor was just as Ji Tianqing had described. It was like an abode where the gods lived in seclusion. After they entered the domain chief's manor, the guards and servants were busy for half a night before they finally settled down. Ji Changkong lived alone in a palace. There were more than a dozen servants and more than 20 guards who were responsible for serving and protecting him. Ji Tianqing asked the housekeeper of the domain chief's manor to take care of the people in charge, the descendants, the servants, and the guards of the Ji family. The empty domain chief's manor soon became lively with more than 100 people living in it. Ji Tianqing stayed in the domain chief's manor for a few days. He took care of everything in the manor and made arrangements for the Ji family members. From now on, the Ji family would settle down in the domain chief's manor. They would thrive and grow stronger. Ji Tianqing spent another 3 days to treat his father's injuries. Ji Tianqing would not be able to treat or cure the hidden injuries in Ji Changkong's body in the past. But now, not only did he have the strength of the Sky Origin stage, but he also had abundant resources and all kinds of elixirs. He spent 3 days and 3 nights to treat his father's injuries. He also consumed a lot of resources and elixirs. Finally, his father's injuries were completely healed. When all of Ji Changkong's injuries were removed and all of his injuries were healed, it was as if he had become 10 years younger overnight. He was full of vigor and radiant. From now on, Ji Changkong would not be troubled by his injuries and his martial arts foundation would recover quickly. The domain chief's manor was rich in spiritual energy and endless cultivation resources. If Ji Changkong were to stay here for a long time, not only would he be able to cultivate with twice the results with half the effort, his strength would also increase rapidly. Unknowingly, half a month passed. In the past 2 weeks, Ji Tianqing had made all the necessary arrangements for the domain chief's mansion. Jiang Chen and 100 guards stayed behind to guard the domain lord's manor. Jiang Chen led the 5 garrison legions and was responsible for the safety of the Tianqin domain. Of course, when Ji Tianqing wasn't in the domain chief's manor, the sky-bearing sect was the one who made all the decisions in the heavenly stellar region. Jiang Chen had to listen to the sky-bearing sect's orders as well. With that, Ji Tianqing was relieved. On the morning of the 16th day, he left the domain chief's manor with 200 honor guards, ready to return to the central province. Ji Ku and Yan followed him back to Zhongzhou. This morning, Ji Tianqing led the Ji family, Jiang Chen led 100 guards, and Chu Tian led the people of the Sky Pillar sect to the domain chief's manor to send Ji Tianqing off. Although Ji Tianqing had only reunited with his family and friends for about 10 days this time, he was still very happy. He came and left in a hurry. Ji Changkong, Chu Tian, and the others were very reluctant to part with him. However, everyone knew that Ji Tianqing was no longer the young man he used to be. He had become a peerless genius, the noble prince, and the domain lord of the Tianqin domain. He still had many important things to deal with. No one asked him to stay for a few more days. They waved goodbye to him in the square outside the domain chief's manor. Ji Tianqing boarded the royal carriage with Ji Ku and Yan under the crowd's warm send-off. The honor guards played music, left the square, and flew into the sky. They rushed to the north as fast as lightning. For the next month, Ji Tianqing and the others had been hurrying on with their journey. The journey was long and boring. Ji Tianqing took the opportunity to cultivate and improve his strength silently. Yan, and Ji Ku did the same. They meditated in the royal carriage to improve their strength silently. The honor guards swaggered through the city with great pomp and grandeur. Ji Tianqing did not encounter any danger along the way. His enemies did not appear again. They did not dare to show up to intercept and assassinate him. On the surface, it seemed that after he became the domain lord, his enemies were afraid of his identity and status and did not dare to deal with him. However, Ji Tianqing knew very well that his enemies were just biding their time. They would never let him go. Especially the Duanmu family, which had been passed down for thousands of years, would not be afraid of him, a little domain lord with no foundation. Ji Tianqing understood this. A strong sense of crisis lingered in his heart. He was eager to improve his strength. Only when he had more strength could he be qualified to compete with those powerful enemies. In the southeast of the central continent, there was a vast forest with a radius of 100,000 miles. It was called the Mangu Forest. In the boundless forest, there were all kinds of exotic flowers and herbs. However, there were also countless poisonous insects, snakes, ants, and fierce monsters. There were also many unknown dangers and poisonous creatures quietly hiding in the depths of the forest. Moreover, the forest was shrouded in hazy clouds all year round. People could not see the situation inside and did not dare to casually step in. If there was no one to guide them, the warriors who rashly entered the Mangu forest would most likely die without a complete corpse. However, in the depths of the Mangu forest, there was a hidden greenwood city. This ancient city with a history of thousands of years had the most herbs and elixirs in the central continent. It was known as the legendary City of Life. For thousands of years, if the people of the central continent had an incurable disease or suffered an irrecoverable injury, they would first think of going to the City of Life to seek treatment. This Greenwood City was the territory of the Duanmu family, one of the three great families of the human clan. The Duanmu family controlled this city and had half of the herbs and elixirs in the central continent. Therefore, they controlled half of the herbs business in the market. 100 miles north of the Greenwood City, there was a towering mountain. There was an ancient and majestic palace at the top of the mountain. It was the residence of the Duanmu family, called the Greenwood Palace. In the palace, in the study of the head of the family, Duanmu Huang, there were three dignified middle-aged men talking seriously. The middle-aged man sitting on the green jade chair was wearing a starry striped robe and a square azure crown. His face was thin but resolute. He had a goatee on his chin. This man's eyes were as deep as the sea of stars. He faintly emitted a mysterious and vast aura. His entire body was surrounded by invisible spiritual energy. Clearly, he was a soul-refining stage cultivator who had surpassed the sky origin stage. This man was the current head of the Duanmu family, Duanmu Huang, the father of Duanmu Yulong. The other two middle-aged men were wearing purple robes. They were tall and strong and had a dignified aura. Chapter 620. The simple and elegant study room was filled with a solemn and murderous atmosphere. The family head, Duanmu Huang's face was as cold as ice. The two elders' faces were also very gloomy and their eyes were filled with hatred. At this moment, the second elder said, "Big brother, Yulong was your most beloved son and also the most outstanding son of our Duanmu family's younger generation. Now that Yulong was killed by that lowly brat and not even his bones were left, when can we take revenge?" The third elder on the side also nodded in agreement and said in a low voice with hatred, "Big brother, our Duanmu family has been standing in the central state for thousands of years. How high is our status? Even the emperor of the imperial court would not dare to kill our Duanmu family's son. Now, everyone in the world is looking at us. If we don't take revenge, where will our Duanmu family's face go?" The two elders were filled with hatred and their eyes were filled with murderous intent. Duanmu Huang said expressionlessly, Yulong was my son, how can I not be heartbroken when he was killed? I want to capture Ji Tianqing more than you, cut him into pieces and torture his soul for 100 years. However, a little impatience will spoil great plans. I cannot let our family be suppressed and in danger because of a moment of hatred. That Ji Tianqing has become the Tianshan region lord and is now carrying the imperial court's edict and the region lord's golden seal, leading a guard of honor to the Tianshan region. He is the Tianshan region lord appointed by the imperial court. If we kill him now, everyone in the world will know that it is our Duanmu family who did it. Assassinating a high official, a region lord appointed by the imperial court is a crime that is close to the death penalty for treason. Hearing Duanmu Huang's words, the two elders frowned and showed an unwilling expression. Big brother, that Ji Tianqing is just an ant-like commoner. Even if he became the emperor's son and the Tianshan region lord, he has no foundation. Even if we kill him, we will be taking revenge for Yulong and it will be justified. The imperial court will not make things difficult for our Duanmu family, right? In these thousands of years, we have made countless contributions to the imperial court. The corners of Duanmu Huang's mouth twitched, revealing a playful sneer. That's right, Ji Tianqing is indeed a lowly commoner like an ant, but who said that he doesn't have a powerful background and foundation? Now that things have come to this, do you still not understand? His biggest backer and background is the imperial court. The two elders were stunned and asked incredulously, how is this possible? That kid is just a commoner. Even if his martial arts talent is outstanding, it's impossible for him to be protected by the imperial court. Duanmu Huang shook his head and said solemnly, whether you believe it or not, this is the result of my repeated investigation and speculation. Although I don't know the exact reason, this is indeed the truth. Otherwise, if he defeated Tianzi in front of everyone and made Tianzi a laughingstock, would he still be safe? If it wasn't for the fact that the imperial court thought highly of him, how could they let a teenager like him become the Tianshan region lord? The two elders' faces changed instantly. They were both angry and anxious. They quickly asked, Big brother, what should we do? With the imperial court protecting him, are we not going to avenge Yulong? Duanmu Huang frowned and a murderous intent flashed in his eyes. He said coldly, how can we not avenge such a deep blood feud? I've said it before, no matter what, we must make Ji Tianqing pay with his blood. I want to cut him into pieces and let him suffer all the pain and torture in the world. This is the only way to vent the hatred in my heart. At this point, Duanmu Huang's tone was filled with hatred. After a pause, he continued, however, now is not the time for revenge. When Ji Tianqing leaves the Tianshan region and returns to the central region, you can find a chance to kill him. You must plan this matter thoroughly. You must kill him in one strike, and you must not leak the slightest bit of information. Although I only need one move to kill him, the imperial court will definitely kill him. But that old fox, the emperor, will definitely keep an eye on me, so I can only leave this matter to you guys. The two elders hurriedly nodded and said solemnly, Big brother, don't worry. We will definitely do this flawlessly. Big brother, don't worry. Leave it to us. Duanmu Huang nodded and did not say anything else. A month passed quickly. Early in the morning, Ji Tianqing and the others returned to the central region city. The majestic honor guard landed outside the city gate. With a noble and dignified aura, they passed through the city gate and entered the city. Ji Tianqing, Ji Ku, and Yan had already finished cultivating. They were sitting in the royal carriage and looking at the scene in the city. It had been more than 3 months since Ji Tianqing left the central region city and returned today. The scene in the city had not changed much. It was as bustling and lively as ever. When the honor guard passed through the straight and wide street, the commoners and martial artists along the way all stepped aside and retreated to the side of the street to look and discuss. The news of Ji Tianqing obtaining the position of Tianshan region lord had long spread throughout the central region. The commoners of the central region city had also been discussing it enthusiastically for more than a month. When countless commoners saw the honor guard, they quickly recognized that it was his honor guard. Immediately, the commoners and martial artists on both sides of the street began to whisper to each other. Quickly look. There's another emperor returning from his patrol. What a big lineup. I know, this is Emperor Ji Tianqing's honor guard. He just became the Tianshan region lord and he returned to the central region city so quickly. I've finally seen the legendary peerless genius Ji Tianqing with my own eyes. He is the #1 genius of our human race, the most monstrous emperor's son. Ever since he defeated the Son of Heaven 4 months ago, there has been news of him for the past few months. He has already created several miracles in a row. It's said that Emperor Tianqing is only 18 years old and he has already become an overlord. This is simply unprecedented. The commoners on both sides of the street were from the human race, the demon race, and the water race. The commoners of the demon race and the water race were mostly exclaiming and discussing. The common people of the human clan all looked very proud and excited. There were even many young martial artists who admired Ji Tianqing who cheered and shouted. They bowed and paid their respects to the royal carriage. In the central region, the commoners of the human race had long recognized him as the #1 genius of the human race. They regarded him as the most monstrous peerless genius and felt proud of him. Many people were still looking forward to when Ji Tianqing would grow and become the peerless genius of the water race and the demon race. At that time, it would be his most glorious moment. He would definitely win glory for the human race and look down on the Tianxian continent. Among the crowd on the street, there was a human man wearing a black robe and a cloak that covered his face. This person was not as excited as the others, but he stared coldly at the honor guard. His eyes were surging with hatred and killing intent. Chapter 621. After a long time, Ji Tianqing's guard of honor passed through half of the city and entered the entrance of the monarch mansion in the forest of divine monuments. Only then did the people of various races on both sides of the street disperse in groups of 3 or 5. The inconspicuous black-robed man in the crowd also quietly left the street and quickly ran out of the central state city. After leaving the north gate, the black-robed man entered the rolling mountain range and ran as fast as lightning for 400 miles. After 2 hours, he was far away from the central state city and entered the depths of the towering mountain range. He entered a cave hidden in the mountain peak. The cave seemed to be formed naturally, but it was actually winding inside with man-made passages and corridors. The black-robed man walked through the winding passages and entered the depths of the cave after a quarter of an hour. Inside the dimly lit cave, there was a faint chill and the smell of blood. The cave was not big, only a dozen meters in radius. The ground and the cave walls were made of rough rock. There were only 2 praying mats made of millstone, a few stone stools, and a stone table in the cave. On a praying mat made of black cold iron sat a bald man in a scarlet robe, who was unusually tall and burly. This person was 3 meters tall and was as sturdy as an iron tower. His exposed neck and arms were covered with thick purple hair. Clearly, this bald-headed man with a ferocious aura was a devil race powerhouse. The black-robed man came into the cave and respectfully bowed to the bald man. He reported in a deep voice, "Demon King Liefeng, this subordinate has found the news. That worm Ji Tianqing has returned to the central state city today." The Demon King Liefeng's bell-sized eyes stared at the black-robed man, revealing a look of joy. "Wu Chuan, is this news true?" The black-robed man called Wu Chuan cupped his hands again and said, "This news is absolutely true. Just now, this subordinate saw Ji Tianqing's guard of honor go to the monarch mansion with my own eyes." The Demon King Liefeng suddenly grinned and laughed, his eyes bursting with a bright light. "Great! That little bastard is finally back. We didn't take the risk to come to the central state city and wait here for a month in vain. Wu Chuan, you need to continue hiding in the city and keep an eye on the city. Once Ji Tianqing leaves the monarch palace, you must immediately report to this prince. Humph. As long as I capture that brat, our fierce Wind tribe will become a great contributor. In the future, we will definitely be appreciated and rewarded by His Majesty the Nephilim King. At this point, Demon King Liefeng's eyes were filled with anticipation. Wu Chuan was silent for a while before he asked in confusion, Lord Devil King, I still don't understand why His Majesty the Devil King ordered all the tribes to capture Ji Tianqing no matter what. That human boy is indeed capable, but I don't think he's worth the great Devil Emperor's attention, do I? Speaking of this issue, the Demon King of Liefeng's expression became solemn. He stared at Wu Chuan with burning eyes, pondered for a while, then said, Wu Chuan, this is a secret that His Majesty the Devil Emperor has ordered us to discuss. However, since you are my adopted son, I believe you and will tell you the truth. When His Majesty the Devil Emperor fled back to the northern desert, his vitality was greatly damaged and his strength was very weak. He will need to recuperate for many years to recover. However, Ji Tianqing has the Kenshin bloodline, which is the blood of the Supreme God. It has incredible effects. If His Majesty the Devil Emperor can obtain the Kenshin blood, he will be able to tap into the infinite power of the God's blood and quickly recover his vitality and strength. In this way, our demon race will have a day to rise up and return to our heyday. Hearing the Demon King of Liefeng's explanation, Wu Chuan was surprised and shouted in disbelief, that lowly human boy actually has the Kenshin bloodline. How is that possible? After being stunned for a while, he came back to his senses and suddenly understood, nodding repeatedly. No wonder that boy is called the #1 genius of the human race. At the age of 18, he has become an overlord. I see. No wonder when His Majesty the Devil Emperor gave the order, all the demon kings of the other tribes came out and swore to capture Ji Tianqing and present him to His Majesty the Devil Emperor. The Demon King of Liefeng nodded and said solemnly, Wu Chuan, it is good that you understand the importance of this. Our Liefeng tribe is the weakest among the hundreds of tribes in the northern desert. We don't have abundant resources, so we will never rise up. If I can capture Ji Tianqing and present him to His Majesty the Devil Emperor, it will be a great contribution. By that time, our Liefeng tribe will be supported by His Majesty the Devil Emperor and become a top tribe. However, there are over a dozen other leaders who have come to the Central Plains with the same purpose as me. We have to seize the time and act before those leaders. We can't let others take the credit. Wu Chuan hurriedly nodded and said seriously, I understand. However, Ji Tianqing can fight a Sky Origin stage cultivator to a draw. My Demon King, you have to be careful. The Demon King of Liefeng waved his hand and sneered, since I have the courage to come to the Central Plains, I have the confidence to defeat him. Even if I can't capture him alive, I will kill him at all costs and bring his body back to His Majesty the Devil Emperor. Wu Chuan cupped his hands and bowed, I wish you a great victory, my Demon King. I hope you can capture Ji Tianqing and win His Majesty the Devil Emperor's appreciation. I will go back to the Central Plains and keep an eye on the situation. I will report to you if there is any movement. After that, Wu Chuan turned around and left the cave, heading to the Central Plains. At the same time, Ji Tianqing's honor guards returned to the king's palace and entered the Tianqing palace. Since he left with Ji Ku and the others, there were only a dozen guards and maids left in the huge Tianqing palace. It was very quiet. Fortunately, no one came to visit during this time. The Tianqing palace was very peaceful. After the honor guards returned to the Tianqing palace, Ji Tianqing asked them to leave and rest. Originally, the 200 honor guards belonged to the imperial court. They should have left the king's palace and returned to the imperial court. However, the king gave the 200 honor guards to him. From now on, they would be his servants and guards. They would stay in the Tianqing Palace and serve as his honor guards when he went out. Ji Tianqing took a stroll around the palace, inspecting every defensive formation inside and out. After making sure that the formations were all right, he returned to his room. The Tianqing Palace was not as luxurious as the king's palace. However, it contained more spiritual qi of heaven and earth, which was more suitable for secluded cultivation. Ji Tianqing arranged the things in the palace and was about to enter the secret chamber to cultivate in seclusion. However, at this moment, a guard came to report that the emperor, Long Yunxiao, had come to visit. Ji Tianqing asked and found out that Long Yunxiao came alone to pass him a message. Chapter 622. Ji Tianqing ordered the guards to bring Long Yunxiao to the guest hall. He rushed to the guest hall and waited for a while before seeing Long Yunxiao walking over. After not seeing him for 2 months, Long Yunxiao was wearing a white robe and a jade crown. He had regained his handsome and heroic demeanor. Ji Tianqing cupped his hands and greeted him. After Long Yunxiao sat down, he asked, "Son of Heaven, why are you here today?" Long Yunxiao did not waste any time and went straight to the point. "I heard that your guard of honor entered the monarch residence and knew that you were back, so I hurried over. The monarch residence has been secretly investigating for more than a month and finally found traces of the ancient demon emperor half a month ago. You just returned to the monarch residence, so you might not know about this. The ancient demon emperor has fled back to the demon race's nest in the northern desert." Ji Tianqing furrowed his brows when he heard the news. His eyes were a little dark, and he said in a low voice, "That damned demon. He disappeared for a few months and secretly fled back to the northern desert. Now that he's back to his nest, it will be difficult to get rid of him in the future." Long Yunxiao nodded and said seriously, "That's right. The northern desert is a forbidden area that no one is willing to step foot in. After the ancient demon emperor fled back to his nest, he could recuperate and slowly recover his strength. If he hasn't returned to the northern desert, the monarch residence can still send experts to get rid of him. But in the current situation, this matter can only be dropped. The monarch residence has already cancelled the plan to get rid of the ancient demon emperor. After all, the monarch residence is only a neutral sacred ground and will not interfere with the grudges between the races. If we want to get rid of the ancient demon emperor completely, we can only rely on the experts of the human and demon races. The aqua race will definitely not help." Ji Tianqing pondered for a while and said calmly, "If that's the case, we can only put this matter aside first. Fortunately, the ancient demon emperor's injuries are very serious, and he will need at least 10 years to recover." Long Yunxiao shook his head and said seriously, "No, the ancient demon emperor will not wait that long. He doesn't have the patience. You have the power that he wants the most, so this monarch speculates that he will definitely think of ways to deal with you." In the past few days, the imperial court spies had discovered some movements. Some disguised demons had infiltrated Central State City. If I didn't guess wrongly, their target is very likely you. Although Long Yunxiao didn't say that the ancient demon emperor's target was the Kenshin bloodline, Long Yunxiao didn't say it explicitly. However, both of them were well aware of just how attractive the Kenshin bloodline was to the demon emperor. Ji Tianqing was only a bit surprised and doubtful, the demons actually dare to infiltrate Central State City? Are they that audacious? Long Yunxiao nodded and said with a solemn expression, "Central Continent City is a neutral zone. Cultivators of all races can enter. This main city was ruled by the emperor's residence. As long as there was no massacre in the city, the emperor's residence would not interfere. Demons have always been cruel and bloodthirsty. They will do anything to achieve their goals. You have to be careful. You'd better stay in the monarch manor and not go out easily." Ji Tianqing nodded. Long Yunxiao continued, "There's another matter. You killed Duanmu Yulong on the stage. Although it was a reasonable action, it also angered the Duanmu clan. The Duanmu clan's experts will definitely not let you go. They will definitely think of a way to kill you and avenge Duanmu Yulong. When you were the new Heavenly Stellar Region Lord, the Duanmu clan did not dare to act rashly with the Imperial Court's prestige protecting you. However, now that you've returned to Central State, the Duanmu clan will not be content. You have to be more vigilant. Ji Tianqing nodded again and cupped his hands. Thank you for your reminder. Other than these two matters, is there anything else? Long Yunxiao withdrew his serious expression and revealed a trace of a smile on his handsome face. Of course there is. The third matter is, congratulations on becoming the Heavenly Stellar Region Lord. Ji Tianqing smiled and thanked him. After discussing official matters, Long Yunxiao didn't stay any longer. He said goodbye and turned to leave. Ji Tianqing asked the guard to send him out of the palace and was about to return to his residence. However, the guard soon returned and reported again, "My lord, there are a few more imperial princes outside the door. They say they are here to congratulate you." Another wave of gifts. Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows and waved his hand, "Bring them in." The guard cupped his hands and obeyed. He quickly left the guest hall and rushed to the main door. Not long after, he led a few human clan imperial princes to the guest hall. Ji Tianqing had been waiting in the hall for a long time. When he saw them arrive, he greeted them and chatted with them. These human princes had entered the monarch mansion earlier than the others, so their rankings were higher than the others. They had nothing to do with the Duanmu clan and the Murong family. They didn't have any enmity or grudges with Ji Tianqing, so they were willing to take the initiative to befriend him. When they found out that Ji Tianqing's honor guard had returned to the imperial mansion, they hurried to the Tianqing palace to congratulate him with the gifts they had prepared earlier. After they were seated, they chatted as they sipped their spiritual tea. Imperial Prince Tianqing, congratulations on becoming the Tianqing Territory Lord. This is a token of my appreciation. Please accept it. Imperial Prince Tianqing, no. I should call you Tianqing Territory Lord from now on. You have become an overlord at such a young age. How enviable. Right now, in the central continent, the name of the Celestial Emperor can be said to be known to everyone. Your title as the #1 genius of the human clan is also well-deserved. Perhaps in another 3 to 5 years, Imperial Prince Tianqing will become the most powerful Imperial Prince in our clan and compete with the most powerful geniuses of the Water Tribe and the Demon Clan. The Imperial Princes were chatting and laughing. They were full of praise for Ji Tianqing. They were full of respect and envy. They were also Imperial Princes and had entered the Imperial Mansion earlier than Ji Tianqing. Their strength was also higher. However, they were not well known. Their status was not as high as Ji Tianqing's. Their martial arts talent could not be compared to Ji Tianqing's. Therefore, the Imperial Princes came to congratulate Ji Tianqing with gifts with the intention of currying favor with him. If these Imperial Princes had some powerful family or force behind them, Ji Tianqing would definitely not befriend them. However, they were all unaffiliated people. Ji Tianqing wouldn't be so unreasonable as to reject them when they took the initiative to befriend them. He accepted the gifts from the Imperial Princes and thanked them. Then, he chatted with them for a while. The Imperial Princes were still worried before they came. They were afraid that Ji Tianqing would be too arrogant and refuse to befriend them. Now that they had given their gifts, they were relieved and did not stay any longer. They bid farewell and left. After sending off the Imperial Princes, Ji Tianqing could finally cultivate in seclusion. He entered the secret chamber with abundant spiritual qi and activated several arrays in the room to gather the spiritual qi of heaven and earth. Before cultivating in seclusion, he took out the star divine gold from his interspatial ring and set up a heavenly spiritual array in the secret chamber. Obviously, he was going to use the terrifying pressure of the heavenly spiritual array to quickly increase his strength and cultivate the ultimate sword body. Chapter 623. Inside the monarch mansion, Yun Yao's cave, Yun Yao's palace. In the cold and elegant study room, Yun Yao was sitting in front of a table, holding an ancient book and reading it. At this moment, there was a knock on the door of the study room, followed by a clear and melodious female voice. Big Sister Yun. Yun Yao put down the ancient book in her hand, looked up at the door and said, "Come in." The door opened and a beautiful woman in a green dress walked into the study room and stood in front of the table. This pure and beautiful woman was Lan Huixin. She bowed to Yun Yao and asked with a smile on her face, "Sister Yun, what instructions do you have for me to come here?" Yun Yao nodded and motioned for her to sit down and talk. She said calmly, "Huixin, the storm of the consort selection has passed and you have stayed in the central province for 3 months. There are many rules in the monarch mansion, so it's not suitable for you to continue staying by my side. Firstly, it's inconvenient for you to move around, and secondly, it will delay your cultivation." Hearing Yun Yao's words, the smile on Lan Huixin's face suddenly froze, and then it turned into a deep sense of loss and sadness. Her clear eyes were covered with a layer of mist, and she said with a voice full of grievance, "Big Sister Yun, are you driving me away?" Yun Yao slightly frowned and shook her head gently, "Huixin, you are the proud daughter of heaven in the Long Sky region. You have your own life and future, so why are you so insistent on staying by my side? Don't worry, I will send Yun Luo to personally escort you back to the Long Sky region." The storm of the consort selection had not passed yet, so it was indeed dangerous for Lan Huixin to return to the Long Sky region alone. Now that 3 months had passed, the storm of that matter had subsided, and the people had gradually forgotten about Lan Huixin. Moreover, with Yun Luo, a heaven origin expert, escorting Lan Huixin, she would definitely be able to return to the Long Sky region safely. Yun Yao had taken Lan Huixin in for 3 months and sent Yun Luo to escort her back, which was already extremely benevolent. However, Lan Huixin finally managed to stay by Yun Yao's side and followed her into the emperor's mansion. How could she be willing to leave just like that? She put on a pitiful look, and tears welled up in her eyes. She immediately knelt in front of Yun Yao, sobbing and begging. "Big Sister Yun, Huixin is now a homeless person. If she leaves your side, I really don't know where to go. Big Sister Yun, please don't chase me away. I just want to find a place to settle down and live a peaceful life. As long as I can stay by your side, I am willing to be your servant and serve you." Lan Huixin cried like a pear blossom in the rain. As she spoke, she kowtowed and saluted. Her expression was extremely mournful. Yun Yao couldn't bear to see her like this. She sighed and said, "Sigh. You're a genius. Why do you have to do this?" However, Lan Huixin shook her head repeatedly and said, "Big Sister Yun, with Huixin's aptitude and status, I can be considered noble in the secular world. However, in the land of Central Province, what does it count for? Huixin comes from a humble background and has mediocre aptitude. It's Huixin's honor to be your servant. I only hope that Big Sister Yun won't chase me away." Lan Huixin knelt down and kowtowed again, begging bitterly with tears flowing down her face. She had already done this much. Yun Yao wasn't a cold-hearted person. How could she still refuse her? Sigh. She sighed deeply and helplessly. She reached out to help Lan Huixin up and said, "Since you're determined not to leave, then stay. Later, I'll ask Yun Luo to arrange a position for you. You'll stay in Yun Yao's palace as an attendant. However, this is the emperor's mansion. You don't have to follow me at all times. Stay in Yun Yao's palace and don't wander around casually." Yun Yao warned her in a solemn tone. Only then did Lan Huixin stop crying and smile. She quickly wiped the tears off her pretty face and nodded repeatedly in agreement. "Big Sister Yun, please don't worry. Huixin knows the rules. I won't cause you any trouble." Yun Yao nodded and said, "Okay, I still have something to do and have to go out. Go find Yun Luo. I'll ask her to make the arrangements." After sending Lan Huixin away, Yun Yao left the cave and rode the spirit crane to the mountains in the southwest. An hour later, the spirit crane landed outside the gate of Tianqing Palace. Yun Yao put away the spirit crane and walked toward the gate. When the guard saw her, he quickly bowed and opened the gate and the defensive array, leading her into the palace. A moment later, she entered Ji Tianqing's study and sat down to wait while the guard went to report the news. Yun Yao waited quietly for a moment. Ji Tianqing rushed over after hearing the news and walked into the study. "Yao Yao, I just came back. How did you get the news so quickly?" Yun Yao looked at him with a gentle gaze and nodded slightly. "I came to find you a few days ago. At that time, you hadn't come back yet, so I sent people to keep an eye on you. When you returned to the monarch palace, there was such a big commotion and lineup. Of course, I got the news immediately." Ji Tianqing smiled and sat down beside her. "I was just about to go into seclusion to cultivate when you came to find me. Is there something important?" Yun Yao frowned and thought for a moment. She said with a complicated tone, "It's important, but it's also not very important." "Oh." Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows and asked with interest, "What is it?" Yun Yao said with a calm expression, "Previously, the little spirit bird brought me a message from Cloud Soul Palace. Half a month ago, my father came out of seclusion. He already knows about the two of us and everything that has happened in the past few months. My father wants to see you, so he wants to invite you to Cloud Soul Palace for a banquet. This is my father's wish. You can think about it on your own. You don't have to go." Ji Tianqing was stunned for a moment. The corner of his mouth hooked up in a smile. He said with a playful tone, "Oh. My future father-in-law wants to see me. How can I not go?" Yun Yao looked at him and hesitated for a moment before asking, "Tianqing, are you serious?" "Of course." Ji Tianqing nodded without hesitation. He said seriously, "Just like how I am serious about you." Yun Yao's expression didn't change, but a trace of shyness flashed through her eyes. She turned her head slightly, not daring to look directly into Ji Tianqing's deep eyes. She nodded and said, "If that's the case, then after you've made your preparations, we'll leave." Ji Tianqing nodded and said, "All right. Wait a moment. I'll go make some preparations." He then left the study to make the necessary preparations. An hour later, he changed into a more formal set of robes and prepared a gift. The two of them left the imperial residence together. They rode on Qianyu and rushed to Cloud Soul Palace as fast as lightning. Zhongzhou City was located in the center of the Zhongzhou continent. Cloud Soul Palace was located in the south of the Zhongzhou continent. The distance between the two places was very far. Even if Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao rushed at full speed, they would still need to fly for 3 days. During the journey, Yun Yao was a little nervous. She explained her father's situation and personality to Ji Tianqing in advance. Chapter 624. After listening to Yun Yao's introduction, Ji Tianqing finally understood her father's situation. Yun Yao's father, Yun Zhongqi, was the current head of Cloud Soul Palace. He was a famous soul refinement realm elite. He was dignified, resolute, and had great foresight. He was extremely shrewd and cunning. Yun Zhongqi usually kept a low profile and would not easily reveal his true strength and methods. However, the fact that the Yun family could survive for so many years under the combined suppression of the two great families without suffering any substantial damage showed Yun Zhongqi's methods and strategies. Yun Yao was worried that her parents would still look down on Ji Tianqing. Even though Ji Tianqing was known as the #1 genius of the human race and had become the Tianqian region lord. However, compared to the ancient Cloud Soul Palace, he was still insignificant. In order to take care of her feelings, Ji Tianqing had to silently endure even if he was looked down on and humiliated. This was the result that Yun Yao did not want to see the most. She would rather Ji Tianqing not attend the banquet at Cloud Soul Palace than let him be humiliated. However, Ji Tianqing remained calm and indifferent, as if he was not worried at all. Of course, this was one of the things that Yun Yao admired about Ji Tianqing the most. No matter when, he was always so calm, composed, indifferent, and unfazed by honor or disgrace. Ji Tianqing's calmness made Yun Yao's worries dissipate. Unknowingly, 3 days passed. On the evening of the 4th day, when the sun was setting in the west, the two of them finally arrived at Cloud Soul Palace. Qian Yu flew high in the sky above the sea of clouds. He could only see the boundless sea of clouds, which was dimly lit by the setting sun. It was like a fairyland. In the depths of the sea of clouds ahead, a dark green mountain peak could be vaguely seen. At the peak of the mountain peak, which was hundreds of miles in radius, stood a magnificent, holy, and majestic palace. This majestic palace was the famous Cloud Soul Palace. The golden setting sun shone on the layers upon layers of lofty palaces, refracting thousands of rays of light, making them appear like the palaces of immortals. A moment later, Qian Yu flew to the top of the mountain and landed on the huge square outside Cloud Spirit Palace. The golden bricks on the ground shone brightly, and several ancient and majestic statues stood on both sides of the square. At the end of the square, there was a wide jade staircase. 200 guards in silver armor stood on both sides of the staircase, giving off a solemn and dignified aura. Ji Tianqing put away Qian Yu and stood side by side with Yun Yao on the square. He raised his head and looked at the gate of Cloud Soul Palace. Cloud Spirit Palace, I'm here again. Ji Tianqing's mood was somewhat complicated as he muttered in his heart. When he left Cloud Spirit Palace, he had said that he would return. Now, after a few months, he had returned to Cloud Spirit Palace. However, back then, he had no status to speak of. Compared to the mighty Yun family, he was like a weed on the side of the road. Now, his name had spread throughout the Central Plains. As the #1 genius of the human race, he had become the territory lord of the Tianshan region. He had joined the ranks of the most honorable people of the human race. Comparing the two, how could one not sigh with emotion? Yun Yao turned her head and looked at him from the side. She said in a gentle voice, "Let's go in." Ji Tianqing nodded. The two of them walked side by side across the square and up the jade staircase to the gate of Cloud Spirit Palace. The guards in silver armor on both sides of the staircase immediately knelt down on one knee to pay their respects. "Greetings, young mistress." At the same time, the guards at the gate of the palace quickly entered Cloud Spirit Palace to report the news. Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao walked through the staircase and the gate. They entered Cloud Spirit Palace, passed through many corridors and courtyards, and walked towards Cloud Spirit Palace. Along the way, all the servants, guards, and maidservants would immediately bow and greet them respectfully when they saw them. When the two of them were far away, the servants, guards, and maidservants began to discuss in low voices. "Young mistress is back. Could the young master beside young mistress be the future son-in-law of the Yun family? I heard that the young master's name is Ji Tianqing. He is the #1 genius of the human race. He became the territory lord of the Tianshan region not long ago. Wow! He is the Prince Tianqing who defeated the emperor and became the territory lord at the age of 18. Yes. It's him. In the past few months, Prince Tianqing's name has spread throughout the Central Plains. It can be said that he is a household name. Although the emperor did not choose young mistress as his heavenly consort, young mistress was able to find such a good match. She is also a peerless genius. Ji Tianqing was now a famous person in the Central Plains. Even the demon race and the aquatics were discussing his deeds. How could Cloud Spirit Palace not know about it? Many maidservants and attendants were discussing Ji Tianqing's deeds. They were all full of admiration and admiration. However, no one knew that the peerless genius in their eyes, Ji Tianqing, had already come to Cloud Spirit Palace a few months ago. However, Ji Tianqing was severely injured and on the verge of death. He was lying in a jade coffin and was in a deep sleep. Very few people had seen him before, and no one knew his name. However, today was different. Ji Tianqing and Yunyao walked side by side and entered Cloud Spirit Palace openly. He exuded a noble aura and displayed a heroic demeanor. He was not weaker than any of the princes of the aristocratic families. Not long after, Ji Tianqing and Yunyao entered Cloud Spirit Palace. They sat in the palace and waited. The two of them had just finished half a cup of tea when Master Yun Zhongqi and Mistress Bailey Ningsu, who had heard the news, rushed to Cloud Spirit Palace with their guards and maidservants. When Yun Zhongqi and Bailey Ningsu stepped into the palace, all the guards and maidservants in the palace knelt down and greeted them respectfully. Ji Tianqing and Yunyao also stood up and turned to look at the entrance. Bailey Ningsu was still dressed as usual. She looked about 30 years old and her appearance was very similar to Yunyao's. She was wearing a long dress embroidered with silver stars and a shawl with moon and stars stripes. She wore a golden crown that was studded with gems. She looked noble and dignified. Ji Tianqing had seen her before, so his eyes did not linger on her. Instead, he looked at Yun Zhongqi. Yun Zhongqi was tall and straight. He was not burly, but he exuded the domineering aura of a transcendent expert. He wore a golden robe with dragon patterns and a black gold crown. He had a jade belt around his waist and a pair of cloud-ascending boots on his feet. His resolute and thin face was angular. His eyes were like the abyss of the sea, containing the unfathomable aura of a transcendent expert. He looked to be about 40 years old. He had a tuft of beard on his chin. He had the dignified aura of a transcendent, but he also had a scholarly aura. When Yun Zhongqi and Bailey Ningsu entered the palace, Yunyao bowed and greeted her parents. "Greetings, father, mother. Congratulations on completing your cultivation and successfully coming out of seclusion." Ji Tianqing also bowed and said in a neither servile nor overbearing manner, "Junior Ji Tianqing greets uncle and auntie." Yun Zhongqi stopped and looked at Ji Tianqing with a calm and gentle gaze. Even Bailey Ningsu looked at Ji Tianqing with a much calmer gaze. She no longer had any obvious prejudice against him. Chapter 625. This was the first time Ji Tianqing and Yun Zhongqi had met. Yun Zhongqi sized him up a few times, then nodded slightly in greeting and welcomed him. Then, Yun Zhongqi led Bailey Ningsu through the hall and sat down at the head of the table. After exchanging some pleasantries, Ji Tianqing took out the gifts he had prepared and gave them to Yun Zhongqi and Bailey Ningsu. Bailey Ningsu didn't say anything and her expression didn't change. Yun Zhongqi's reaction was also very calm. He nodded slightly and motioned for the maid beside him to accept the gift. Clearly, they didn't have any expectations for Ji Tianqing's gift and didn't even want to look at it. In their opinion, with Ji Tianqing's status, what kind of treasures could he bring out that would be worthy of their appreciation? Their attitudes were calm and reserved, cold but not lacking in etiquette. They were like the leaders of an ancient family. Ji Tianqing had expected all of this, so he didn't feel awkward at all. After he sat down, Bailey Ningsu ordered the maid beside her to prepare for the banquet. Yun Zhongqi and Ji Tianqing began to chat. He said calmly, "Tianqing, although I've just come out of seclusion, I've heard many things about you. In recent months, your name has spread throughout Central Plains and you've been in the limelight. Cultivators from all races are talking about you. Even the younger generation of disciples from Cloud Soul Palace are full of praise for you." Ji Tianqing cupped his hands and said calmly, "It's just a title. I've made a fool of myself in front of uncle." Yun Zhongqi smiled and shook his head when he saw that Zuan wasn't arrogant or complacent. People live for nothing but fame, fortune, friendship, and righteousness. Young and outstanding people, who doesn't want to be famous? It's rare for you to be able to obtain such glory and become a household name in Central Plains. There's no need to be humble. Moreover, you're only 18 years old and you're already an overlord. Such a feat is rarely seen in history. Your future is limitless. Although Yun Zhongqi was only praising Ji Tianqing out of politeness, Ji Tianqing's actions were not very surprising. However, ordinary geniuses were not worthy of his attention. It was also a great honor for Ji Tianqing to be praised by a soul-refining expert. Ji Tianqing remained calm and said with a smile, "Uncle, you flatter me. The position of the Tianqian region lord is unparalleled in the 9 southern regions. But in this prosperous central state, there are rich and powerful people everywhere. Even the master of a region is not considered a top figure." Ji Tianqing and Yun Zhongqi were exchanging pleasantries when Bailey Ningsu, who had been silent all this time, suddenly spoke up. She looked down at Ji Tianqing and said indifferently, "I heard that you killed Duanmu Yulong, the son of the first wife of the Duanmu clan, in front of everyone in the imperial court. That Duanmu Yulong is the most outstanding descendant of the Duanmu family, the next successor of the family head. You and the Duanmu clan have such a deep blood feud. The Duanmu clan will definitely not let you off. How can the current you talk about having a boundless future? I'm afraid you're in imminent danger, right?" Hearing Bailey Ningsu's words, Yun Yao's expression changed and she revealed an anxious expression. She called out in a reproachful tone, "Mother." Bailey Ningsu's expression did not change. She just stared at Ji Tianqing, waiting to see how he would respond. Yun Zhongqi raised his brows and patted the back of Bailey Ningsu's hand. He said in a low voice, "Ningsu, Tianqing is a guest from afar." Although he did not say the second half of the sentence, it was clear that he was reminding Bailey Ningsu not to embarrass the guest too much. Ji Tianqing was not embarrassed or angry. Instead, he revealed a confident smile and said calmly, "In everyone's eyes, the Duanmu clan is a colossus that has been passed down for thousands of years, while I'm just a commoner who has just risen to prominence. Everyone probably thinks that I won't be able to withstand the Duanmu clan's revenge and will definitely be crushed to pieces. However, I don't think that's the case. When I killed Duanmu Yulong, I already knew that the Duanmu clan would seek revenge. If I didn't have the corresponding preparations and confidence, how could I have killed Duanmu Yulong in front of everyone?" Yun Zhongqi stared at Ji Tianqing. When he saw that he did not shrink back and was confident and indifferent, he couldn't help but reveal a look of interest. Bailey Ningsu immediately frowned and asked Ji Tianqing, "You want to contend with the Duanmu clan with your strength? You're overestimating your own strength. It's not that I'm looking down on you, but I really can't see that you have any ability to resist the Duanmu clan." Yun Zhongqi immediately waved his hand and interrupted Bailey Ningsu. "Today is the first time this king has met Tianqing. I only invited him to a banquet. Let's not talk about this topic anymore." Bailey Ningsu immediately bowed and said no more. Not long after, the banquet began. More than a dozen young and beautiful maids brought over many delicacies and nectar and placed them on the table in front of everyone. Although it was called a banquet, it was actually just a small family banquet. There were only Yun Zhongqi and his wife, Ji Tianqing, and Yun Yao. During the banquet, Yun Zhongqi occasionally chatted with Ji Tianqing and asked him about his past with Yun Yao. Bailey Ningsu did not interrupt. She only glanced at Ji Tianqing from time to time, observing his expression and reaction. She probably thought that Ji Tianqing was pretending to be calm and confident, forcing himself not to have stage fright. After an hour, the banquet ended. Yun Zhongqi stood up and looked at Ji Tianqing. He said kindly, "Tianqing, are you interested in admiring the night view of Yunling Palace and taking a walk with me?" Ji Tianqing naturally understood his intention. He smiled and cupped his hands. "Since uncle has invited me, I'm very honored. How could I refuse?" Yun Zhongqi smiled and nodded. He led him out of the main hall and into the palace at the back. Bailey Ningsu said a few words to Yun Yao and sent her away. Then, she also stood up and left the main hall. Yun Zhongqi led Ji Tianqing through many corridors and courtyards. They climbed up a 1,000-feet tall silver pagoda. At this time, night had already fallen. The night sky was filled with stars, and there was even a bright moon in the sky. The silver pagoda was bathed in the light of the moon and stars. It shone with silver light, looking very dazzling. Ji Tianqing and Yun Zhongqi climbed up to the top of the pagoda. They stood in a corridor facing the sea of clouds, admiring the sea of clouds and the night view. The top of the pagoda was silent. There was no one else besides the two of them. Ji Tianqing turned to look at Yun Zhongqi beside him. He said in a playful tone, "Uncle wants to talk to me alone. Do you have something to teach me?" Yun Zhongqi looked at him with a burning gaze. He said in a low voice, "I don't have to teach you anything. I'm just curious. What kind of plan do you have to fight against the Duanmu family?" Ji Tianqing nodded. He said with a serious expression, "The Duanmu family has been passed down for thousands of years. They have deep roots in Zhongzhou and are very powerful. Even the imperial court has to be wary of them. I can't fight against the Duanmu family alone. There's no doubt about that." Chapter 626. Hearing Ji Tianqing's words, Yun Zhongqi frowned and revealed a playful look. "Did Yao Yao tell you all this?" "That's right." Ji Tianqing nodded and said calmly, "However, even if Yao Yao didn't say it, it's not a secret. Everyone knows about it." Yun Zhongqi stared at him and asked in a low voice, "What? Do you mean to say that you want Cloud Soul Palace to protect you?" Ji Tianqing shook his head and said with a smile, "No. It's not Cloud Soul Palace protecting me, it's helping me. The Duanmu family and the Murong family have joined forces to fight against the Yun family. In the past 10 years, their actions have become more and more arrogant and they've been pressuring the Yun family. If I'm not wrong, Uncle must be having a headache. However, even if the three great families have grudges against each other, they can't openly fight. Otherwise, it won't be good for anyone. But I'm different. I've already formed a blood feud with the Duanmu family. I can use all my strength to fight against the Duanmu family. If I can get rid of the Duanmu family, I can save the Yun family from its current predicament. This is definitely the result that you want to see the most. However, there's no free lunch in this world. If the Yun family wants to get out of this predicament, how can we just sit back and watch? So, we can work together to fight against the Duanmu family. If we work together, we'll both benefit, and if we don't, we'll both suffer. I believe that Uncle won't refuse, right?" Ji Tianqing's words were full of confidence and clear. His entire body exuded confidence and certainty. Yun Zhongqi stared at him and suddenly felt an indescribable aura from him. He couldn't help but admire him. He, it's just as I expected. You agreed to come to Cloud Soul Palace so easily. It's not as simple as just attending a banquet. You're here to rope in the Yun family and find help. Yun Zhongqi stroked his beard with a smile and nodded slightly in agreement. You're right. I do want to get rid of the Duanmu family as soon as possible and get rid of this number one enemy. Cloud Soul Palace can't fight against the Duanmu family. Otherwise, it will affect the human race's situation and even the situation of the middle state. However, why should I believe your words? Ji Tianqing answered without hesitation, this is very simple. If I can successfully eradicate the Duanmu family, it will naturally be a good thing for Cloud Soul Palace. If my plan fails, I will be killed by the Duanmu family and Cloud Spirit Palace will not be implicated. No matter what, this will only be beneficial to the Yun family. Yun Zhongqi frowned and weighed the pros and cons for a moment before nodding solemnly and agreeing to this matter. Good. Since that's the case, I'll give you a chance. I'll leave this matter to you. Cloud Spirit Palace can secretly help and support you. As he spoke, Yun Zhongqi took out a dark gold token from his interspatial ring that had 5 colored clouds engraved on it and handed it to Ji Tianqing. This is my token, the Magic Cloud Medallion. If you need any help in the Central Continent, you can bring this Magic Cloud Medallion to the Yun clan. They will definitely do their best to assist you. In addition, if you encounter any life-threatening danger that you cannot resolve, you can also use the magic cloud medallion to send a message. I will save you once. Ji Tianqing held the magic cloud medallion and sized it up for a moment before keeping it in his interspatial ring. He smiled and cupped his hands in respect. Thank you, uncle. Yun Zhongqi put his hands behind his back and looked down at the vast sea of clouds below the tower. He said with a serious expression, although I am willing to believe you and give you a chance to cooperate, you must be careful. However, you must act cautiously and not underestimate the Duanmu clan's power. The Duanmu family is entrenched in the greenwood city of the Mangu forest and controls almost half of the elixir trade in the central continent. They can mobilize countless forces and powerhouses. Ji Tianqing listened attentively. When Yun Zhongqi was done, he nodded solemnly and said, Uncle, don't worry. I will not act recklessly and will not disappoint you. Good, that's good. Yun Zhongqi nodded in satisfaction and waved his sleeves. Then you may leave and rest early. Ji Tianqing bowed to him, turned around, and left the top of the tower. Not long after he left, a door at the end of the corridor opened. Bailey Ningsu, who was wearing a long dress, walked out of the room. She lightly walked to Yun Zhongqi's side and asked with a puzzled expression, Husband, although Ji Tianqing is talented in martial arts, he comes from a humble background and has no power to speak of. How can he fight against the Duanmu family with just his strength? How can you make a hasty decision to cooperate with him just based on a few words of his? Yun Zhongqi continued to stare at the vast sea of clouds. His expression did not change. His eyes were as deep as the starry sky and contained deep wisdom. He calmly said, Ningsu, you met him a few months ago. You should know better than me what he looked like at that time and what his strength is now. If he really comes from a humble background and has no power to back him up, no matter how talented he is, how could he have such a shocking change in just a few months? Bailey Ningsu was stunned. She frowned and said, That's right. A few months ago, he was just an ordinary youth. Now, he has become the #1 genius of the human race, the Tianshan region lord. Since ancient times, no one has been able to increase their strength so quickly in such a short period of time. But no matter how much of a genius he is, he needs time to grow. At the very least, he needs to reach the spirit-refining realm to be able to fight against the Duanmu family. How could the Duanmu family give him time to grow? I'm afraid that in less than a month, he will be killed. Since ancient times, it was hard for a humble family to have a noble son. The main reason was that humble families did not have enough resources for their geniuses to cultivate. But there was another important reason. Humble geniuses did not have a strong power to protect them. If they were not careful, they would be killed in the cradle. So, if a humble genius wanted to grow, they would have to rely on a strong power for protection. Otherwise, they would have to keep a low profile to avoid provoking a strong enemy. In Bailey Ningsu's eyes, Ji Tianqing was a humble genius who did not have a strong background and went around causing trouble. He would die soon. Yun Zhongqi shook his head and said, Ningsu, your worries are reasonable. But how could Ji Tianqing not have anything to rely on? If he didn't have an expert behind him or a strong power to support him, how could he have grown so quickly? The monarch emperor is a wise and far-sighted sovereign. How could he let an 18-year-old like him become the overlord of a region? Now that the monarch emperor was mentioned, Bailey Ningsu did not say anything else. She could only nod in agreement. The monarch emperor is a supreme expert who has condensed a primordial spirit Dharma idol. He can see the past, present, and future. Of course, the decisions he makes have deep meaning. Yun Zhongqi continued, also, I used a secret soul technique to test Ji Tianqing. He is not pretending to be confident. He really has nothing to fear. From his body, I can feel an aura that even I am afraid of. I am very curious. Who is the expert or power behind him? Previously, he caused a huge storm in the imperial court. Soon, Will he be able to cause a huge wave in the central state? My Yun family's future son-in-law cannot be a mediocre person. He must be a peerless genius. If he can really create a miracle and eradicate the Duanmu family, then I will recognize him as my Yun family's son-in-law. I will welcome him into the Cloud Soul Palace with a 10-mile-long corridor and 10,000 people. Chapter 627. Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao stayed at Cloud Soul Palace for the night. The next morning, the two of them bid farewell and returned to the monarch palace. Yun Zhongqi had already discussed the cooperation with Ji Tianqing, so he naturally wouldn't ask him to stay. When the sun rose, Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao were riding on Qianyu, flying through the sky as fast as lightning. The two of them sat side by side on Qianyu's back, intimately leaning against each other as they looked at the sky calmly. Yun Yao was silent for a while before saying, "Tianqing, at the banquet last night, don't take what my mother said to heart." Ji Tianqing put his arm around Yun Yao and pulled her into his embrace. He smiled and said, "It's fine. Auntie was only speaking the truth. Why would I be angry at her? It's not just her. I'm afraid that other than you and uncle, no one else believes that I can go against the Duanmu family." Yun Yao frowned when Yun Zhongqi was mentioned. She asked curiously, "My father brought you to Star Cloud Pagoda last night. Did he talk to you about something?" Ji Tianqing nodded and said with a smile, "Uncle is indeed a spirit refinement realm expert and the leader of Cloud Soul Palace. He is indeed as you said. He has great foresight and is able to see things that normal people can't. I've already discussed it with uncle. Cloud Soul Palace is willing to cooperate with me to deal with the Duanmu family." Hearing this, Yun Yao's beautiful face revealed a look of surprise. "What? My father actually agreed to cooperate with you?" Yun Yao's voice was filled with disbelief, surprise, and relief. She was already satisfied that her parents would look at Ji Tianqing seriously and not embarrass Ji Tianqing when she brought Ji Tianqing back to Cloud Soul Palace. If her father was benevolent and was willing to help Ji Tianqing for her sake, it would be a great surprise for her. But she didn't expect that Ji Tianqing would be able to get her father's approval and even reach an official cooperation. Helping and cooperating were two completely different concepts. One-sided help was almost equivalent to pity and charity. On the other hand, cooperation meant that both parties were on equal footing and working together was mutually beneficial. Yun Yao looked at Ji Tianqing with burning eyes and couldn't help but exclaim, "Tianqing, what did you say to my father? He's very shrewd and scheming. He definitely won't agree to work with you just because of me." "Of course." Ji Tianqing nodded and said with a smile, "Uncle is the patriarch of the Yun family after all, so he has to weigh the pros and cons before making any decision. The Yun family can't directly deal with the Duanmu family, but I have nothing to worry about. The Yun family only needs to support and help me in secret, and they will be able to enjoy the fruits of my labor without being implicated. How could uncle refuse something that only benefits and no harm?" After listening to his explanation, Yun Yao nodded her head. "I see. Since my father is willing to cooperate with you, then I'm relieved." Ji Tianqing looked at her with deep affection and said in a deep voice, "Yao Yao, not long after I entered the monarch mansion, you told me that the Duanmu family and the Murong family had joined hands to deal with the Yun family and were in a difficult situation. Actually, at that time, I had already made up my mind to help the Yun family eradicate a strong enemy and rescue them from their predicament. So, I had already planned to kill Duanmu Yulong in front of everyone in the arena. The Duanmu family's revenge was also within my expectations." Hearing his words, Yun Yao was stunned. Her heart was full of emotions as she looked at Ji Tianqing with a complicated expression and said, "Tianqing, I'm already very grateful that you didn't blame my mother for treating you that way. I didn't expect that you would rather risk your life to help the Yun family. Why did you do this?" Ji Tianqing held her hands and said with a serious expression, "Everything Auntie did was for your own good. I can understand her feelings and thoughts, so of course I won't blame her. After all, they are your parents, the closest people to you in this world. No matter how they treat me, I won't let you be stuck in the middle. For you, I will become stronger and let them recognize and accept me. Only in this way can we get their blessings when we entrust our lives to each other. Although these words were not a confession, they were more touching than words of love. They were more sincere and sincere. Yunyao's heart was full of emotions and happiness. She couldn't help but snuggle up to Ji Tianqing's shoulder and tightly hugged his neck. The two of them intimately leaned against each other and the atmosphere was warm and beautiful. Qian Yu tried her best to maintain a calm flight so as not to disturb the two of them. At the same time, in the monarch mansion, Long Yunxiao, who was dressed in a golden robe, flapped his golden wings and flew over the mountain range like a meteor. Not long after, he arrived in the sky above Yunyao mountain range and landed outside the gate of Yunyao Palace. The guard at the gate immediately recognized him and hurriedly greeted him with a respectful salute. "Greetings to your majesty. May I ask if your majesty is here to look for our eldest miss?" Long Yunxiao nodded and said with a dignified voice, "That's right. This monarch has something to discuss with her." The guard hesitated for a moment before cupping his hands and reporting, "Your Majesty, this is really unfortunate. Eldest Miss is not in the palace, not in the palace." "Why did she leave right after returning to the monarch mansion?" Long Yunxiao frowned. The guard respectfully bowed, not daring to nor knowing how to respond. At this moment, a graceful and beautiful figure suddenly appeared in the courtyard behind the gate. It was a pure beauty wearing a colorful dress. Although she was dressed like a female official, it couldn't hide her beautiful appearance and temperament. Without a doubt, this woman was Lan Huixin. When she saw Long Yunxiao at the gate, she immediately froze on the spot and stopped in her tracks. She stared at the handsome and noble Long Yunxiao and revealed a look of surprise. She was so excited that her hands were trembling. "Great! The emperor really came to look for Yunyao. I didn't endure the humiliation of kneeling down and begging for mercy in front of Yunyao in vain. I finally waited for the emperor. My chance has come." Lan Huixin secretly shouted excitedly, and her heartbeat sped up a little. She quickly took a deep breath, calmed her emotions, and walked towards the gate with light steps. Arriving at the door, she wore a perfect smile and looked at Long Yunxiao with tender eyes. She bowed and said, "Greetings, your majesty." Long Yunxiao was about to turn around and leave when he heard Lan Huixin's voice. He turned his head and looked at her. When he saw her appearance, Long Yunxiao was startled and asked with a frown, "It's you? Why are you in Yunyao's palace?" Lan Huixin was secretly delighted and quickly replied, "It's a long story. If your majesty doesn't mind, why don't you come in and have a chat?" Long Yunxiao glanced at her and said expressionlessly, "No need. This emperor is here to look for Yunyao. I don't have time to listen to your story." Lan Huixin was a little disappointed, but her expression didn't change. She quickly said, "Your majesty, Sister Yun is not in the palace. I don't know why she went to Tianqing Palace to look for Prince Tianqing. Sister Yun has been gone for 3 days and 3 nights and hasn't returned yet." Hearing these 2 sentences, Long Yunxiao's body stiffened, and his expression changed slightly. Chapter 628. 3 days and 3 nights, could it be that they are already living together? Long Yunxiao muttered silently in his heart. His expression was cold and his eyes were a little gloomy. Although he did not see the intimacy between Yunyao and Ji Tianqing, he did not see it. In the past 2 months, he had gradually let go and was trying to forget the obsession in his heart. However, when he suddenly heard that Yunyao and Ji Tianqing were together and hadn't returned for 3 days and 3 nights, his heart still felt very uncomfortable and his chest felt very stifled. After Lan Huixin finished speaking, she secretly observed Long Yunxiao's reaction. When she saw Long Yunxiao's slightly cold expression and gloomy eyes, she was secretly delighted and a trace of a victorious smile flashed across her eyes. Your Majesty, what's wrong? Are you feeling a little unwell? Lan Huixin revealed a puzzled and concerned expression. She hurriedly took out a handkerchief with a faint body fragrance and was about to wipe Long Yunxiao's forehead. Although there were no beads of sweat on Long Yunxiao's forehead, Lan Huixin only wanted to use this opportunity to get close to Long Yunxiao. Perhaps she could take advantage of this opportunity to enter. Long Yunxiao came back to his senses and glanced at her indifferently before turning to leave. Lan Huixin was stunned for a moment. Her slender hand holding the handkerchief stopped in mid-air and her expression stiffened. However, she immediately returned to normal and put away the handkerchief. Seeing that the guard guarding the door was staring at her with a strange expression, she snorted coldly and swayed her slender waist as she turned and entered the door. As she walked on the wide and clean road, she was still secretly calculating in her heart. Humph, looking at the Emperor's reaction, it's obvious that he still has feelings for Yunyao. As long as he comes to look for Yunyao often, I can see him often. Moreover, I will make him more and more disappointed in Yunyao. Once he has completely given up on Yunyao, I will be able to find an opportunity to take advantage of the situation. Thinking of this, Lan Huixin's beautiful face revealed a smile. Her heart was filled with anticipation and longing. 3 days passed in the blink of an eye. On the evening of the 4th day, Ji Tianqing and Yunyao returned to Zhongzhou city and returned to the emperor's residence. Yunyao didn't return to her cave residence. Instead, she followed Ji Tianqing to Tianqing Palace. When the two of them returned to Tianqing Palace, Yan, and Ji Ku were already waiting for them. Ji Tianqing brought everyone and Qian Yu into his study room to discuss an important matter. I have something to announce to everyone. This time, Yao Yao and I went to Cloud Soul Palace. We have already reached an agreement with the Yun family and we will work together to deal with the Duanmu family. Ji Ku and Yan both had shocked expressions on their faces. However, both of them knew that Ji Tianqing must have something important to announce, so they temporarily suppressed the surprise and doubt in their hearts and did not speak. Ji Tianqing said with a solemn expression, I killed Duanmu Yulong and sowed deep hatred with the Duanmu clan. They will definitely retaliate. Previously, I had the protection of the imperial court's prestige, so the Duanmu family didn't dare to act rashly. Now that I'm in the imperial king's residence, the Duanmu family doesn't have a chance to do anything. However, the Duanmu family will definitely not continue to endure. Once they find a chance, they will definitely kill me. This time, I won't sit still and wait for the Duanmu family to come knocking on my door. Ji Ku was stunned for a moment. He frowned and asked, Brother Tianqing, are you going to take the initiative to attack? Ji Tianqing nodded and said, that's right. If I passively defend, no matter how careful I am, it's inevitable that there will be mistakes. Against a colossus like the Duanmu family, any carelessness may cause us to be doomed eternally. Instead of that, I might as well take the initiative to attack and find an opportunity to gradually overthrow the Duanmu family. Yunyao, Ji Ku, and Yan thought for a moment and nodded in agreement. Ji Tianqing looked at Yunyao and said, Yao Yao, the Yun family and the Duanmu family have been dealing with each other for thousands of years. You should know the Duanmu family's situation very well. Tell us about the Duanmu family's situation so that I can be prepared. Yunyao nodded and said with a solemn expression, the Duanmu family is entrenched in Xianwood City in the mango forest. That area is rich in all kinds of rare medicinal herbs and is the largest natural medicinal garden in the continent. The Duanmu family is good at refining medicinal pills and has many outstanding alchemy grandmasters in the family. Nearly half of the medicinal pill business in the Middle Continent is controlled by the Duanmu family. Therefore, the wealth and resources accumulated by the Duanmu family in the past 1,000 years have reached an unfathomable level. My father once said that the Duanmu family's wealth and resources are enough to support 3 to 5 soul refinement realm powerhouses. However, the Duanmu family only has 2 known soul refinement realm powerhouses. Hearing up to here, Ji Tianqing raised his brows and asked, the Duanmu family actually has two soul refinement realm powerhouses? Yunyao nodded and said, that's right. The current patriarch, Duanmu Huang, is a soul refinement realm powerhouse. In addition, the Duanmu family has an ancestor who hasn't shown his face for 300 years. He is also a soul refinement realm powerhouse. Above Duanmu Huang, there are several great elders. They are all peak sky origin stage powerhouses. Those great elders are very senior. They don't care about worldly affairs and focus on breaking through to the soul refinement realm. Duanmu Huang has 4 brothers who are all great elders. They are all above the 7th level of sky origin stage. They are in charge of the medicinal pill business in different areas. In the middle continent, the Duanmu family has a medicinal shop and a medicinal pill pavilion in every city. They are all guarded by sky origin stage powerhouses. Ji Tianqing frowned and thought for a while, then said seriously, so, the number of sky origin stage powerhouses that the Duanmu family can mobilize is unimaginable. Yunyao nodded seriously. Other than the sky origin stage powerhouses led by the Duanmu family, there are many first-rate and second-rate forces that depend on the Duanmu family. They are the vassals of the Duanmu family. Those first-rate and second-rate forces are all over the middle continent. They are from all kinds of clans. Although they are not a big threat, they are very difficult to deal with. Ji Tianqing waved his hand and said, no matter the Duanmu family's great elders or their businesses and forces, we can't touch them for now. Yao Yao, tell us more about the younger generation of the Duanmu family. All right. Yunyao answered and said, as I said, Duanmu Huang has 4 brothers. Therefore, there are 4 branches in the Duanmu family. In those 4 branches, there are over a dozen of the younger generation. However, most of them are mediocre. Among them, Duanmu Yulong is the most outstanding one. The person second only to Duanmu Yulong is his half-brother, Duanmu Feiyu. Hearing this, Ji Tianqing's eyes lit up. He nodded and said, all right. Tell us more about this Duanmu Feiyu. Yunyao thought for a while and said, Duanmu Feiyu is the son of Duanmu Huang's second wife. He is over 20 years old and has reached the 2nd level of sky origin stage. It seems that he wants to join the royal family. However, Duanmu Feiyu is frivolous. He is not sophisticated. He is not as mature as Duanmu Yulong. Chapter 629. After listening to Yunyao's introduction, Ji Tianqing pondered for a moment and immediately made a decision. With our current strength, it's basically impossible for us to face the Duanmu family head-on. Those elders of the Duanmu family are also old foxes and shouldn't be provoked. In comparison, only the younger generation is easier to deal with. Hearing these words, Yunyao looked at Ji Tianqing and asked, Tianqing, you mean to make a move on Duanmu Feiyu? Ji Tianqing nodded and said with a straight face, if we want to deal with the Duanmu family, we have to think of a way to cause internal chaos. With such a large family, I don't believe that their internal structure is as solid as a piece of iron. Wouldn't there be any power struggles and internal strife? Especially since Duanmu Yulong was killed by me, the most outstanding successor to the family head is gone. The most promising successor to the family head position is Duanmu Feiyu, and this person is also a hedonistic son of a rich family. Won't the other young disciples have any complaints? Yao Yao, can you find out where this person lives? I want to personally observe this person. Perhaps I can find an opportunity. Yunyao frowned and thought for a while before replying, if I remember correctly, 2 months ago, Duanmu Feiyu kidnapped a princess from a certain tribe and brought her to Central State City. That tribe's princess seems to be an absolute beauty and is being kept by Duanmu Feiyu in a courtyard in the southern part of the city. Every evening, Duanmu Feiyu would go there to seek pleasure. Hearing this, Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows and the corners of his mouth hooked into a playful sneer, hiding a mistress in a golden house. Since it's like this, then we should personally take a look. A hedonistic son of a rich family like Duanmu Feiyu is definitely easier to deal with. Let's make a move on him first. Ji Tianqing hadn't personally seen Duanmu Feiyu yet and didn't have a concrete plan for the time being. However, everyone felt that his idea was feasible. Starting with Duanmu Feiyu was not a bad idea. After confirming the initial target, Ji Tianqing and Yunyao discussed and added a few more pieces of information. They decided to start the operation tomorrow afternoon. The night passed quickly. At noon the next day, Ji Tianqing and Yunyao left the monarch mansion after they were ready. The two of them entered Central Continent City, heading towards Clearwater Street in the city's south. The house that Duanmu Feiyu used to hide his mistress was located at the end of Shuiqing Street. It was a quiet and secluded residence in the midst of chaos. It was called the Excellence Courtyard. It occupied a large area and was extremely imposing and luxurious. 2 hours later, Ji Tianqing and Yunyao arrived at the superior courtyard and hid in a forest outside the courtyard. Ji Tianqing released his invisible divine sense and enveloped a radius of 400 meters to investigate the situation of the superior courtyard. The entire residence had a radius of 1,000 meters. There weren't any other courtyards or residences in the surroundings. There was only a forest and a small lake. The superior courtyard was protected by a heaven origin grand formation. On the surface, it looked like no one was moving around, and the courtyard was silent as well. However, the heaven origin grand formation was extremely profound and complicated. Ordinary formation grandmasters were unable to break it. Even with Ji Tianqing's attainments in the formation Dao, he still spent more than an hour to break open a gap in the grand formation. He and Yunyao passed through the gap in the grand formation and silently snuck into the residence. The two of them hid in an empty utility room and secretly used their divine sense to investigate the situation in the courtyard. There were a few Origin Core stage guards at the entrance. There were a few hidden sentries hidden in the courtyard, and all of them had a strength at the 8th or 9th level of the Origin Core stage. However, these guards and hidden sentries were unable to pose a threat to the two of them. The superior courtyard was only a place that Duanmu Feiyu used to hide his mistress. It was impossible for it to have a tight defense, let alone a large number of Heaven Origin stage experts guarding it. There were only 2 Heaven Origin stage experts in the entire residence. One of them had a strength at the 4th level of the Heaven Origin stage. He was a tall and sturdy middle-aged man with a fierce aura. This person was currently leisurely drinking tea and resting in the lobby of the second courtyard, enjoying the service of 2 servant girls. Ji Tianqing was able to discern that this person was most likely Duanmu Feiyu's follower and guard. The other young man, who was at the 2nd level of the Heaven Origin stage, was currently entangled with a beauty in one of the bedrooms of the 3rd courtyard. The young man was around 20 years old. His figure was tall and thin, and his cheeks were white and tender. His lips were red and his teeth were white. It was obvious that he was a young master from a wealthy family. He was precisely Duanmu Yulong's younger brother, the famous second young master of the Duanmu clan in Central State City, Duanmu Feiyu. At this moment, in the spacious and luxurious bedroom, Duanmu Feiyu was hugging a beauty around 18 or 19 years old and rolling around on the large sandalwood bed. Their clothes had been taken off and thrown on the floor. A brocade quilt was wrapped around the two of them. It also covered the soft moans that were making people restless. Ji Tianqing sensed this with his spiritual mind. He couldn't help but frown. His eyes turned a bit weird. Yunyao saw the weird look on his face, so she asked him with her spiritual mind, "Tianqing, how is it going? Have you found Duanmu Feiyu?" She had just reached the 1st level of the Heaven Origin stage half a month ago. However, her spiritual mind could only sense 100 meters around her. She couldn't see what was going on in the 3rd courtyard. Ji Tianqing stayed silent for a while. Then he said calmly, "Yes, I have found him. I am observing him now." 15 minutes passed without them noticing. At this moment, Duanmu Feiyu finally stopped. He casually put on his robe and leaned against the headboard to rest. The beauty with a delicate body and a pure face hid under the quilt and put on her clothes. Then she stretched out her trembling legs and got off the bed. She combed her messy hair and wiped away the sweat on her forehead. Then she brought over a pot of spirit wine and a plate of spirit fruits to serve Duan Mufeyu. Duan Mufeyu held the wine pot and drank with satisfaction. He enjoyed the beauty massaging his legs and shoulders. His face was full of pride. Su, my little beauty. How was my spear technique today? Was it that every spear pierced your heart and made you so intoxicated that you couldn't stop yourself? The girl named Su, suppressed her shyness. She peeled a grape and fed it to him. Then she nodded her head in response. Yes, young master is becoming more and more powerful. You come to me every day and you are still so brave. I really can't stand it. Su-er's voice was soft and timid. As she said those words to please Duan Mufeyu, her pretty face was as red as an apple. Duan Mufeyu instantly laughed proudly. He reached out and pinched Su-er's pretty face. He said with a smile, I've been in a good mood recently. Of course I'm full of energy. Speaking of which, I really have to thank that little bastard Ji Tianqing. If he hadn't killed my eldest brother, how could my extremely talented eldest brother have died in the Yellow Springs? The Duanmu clan's patriarch position originally belonged to my big brother. Who asked him to be so dazzling? But now that he's dead, my Duanmu Feiyu's chance has come. Without my big brother's halo, I'll be the Duanmu clan's most outstanding young genius. My little Su, it won't be long before I become the Duanmu clan's patriarch. At that time, I'll marry you and you'll be the noble Duanmu clan's matriarch. How about it? Little beauty, are you happy? Chapter 630. Duanmu Feiyu had a complacent attitude, as if the large stone that had been pressing down on his heart for many years had finally been removed. In the past many years, he and the other young disciples of the Duanmu family had lived under Duanmu Yulong's shadow. Outsiders and the elders of the Duanmu family could only see Duanmu Yulong's excellence and excellence. No matter how hard he worked, no matter how outstanding his performance was, he would always be inferior to Duanmu Yulong. His hard work and achievements were insignificant compared to Duanmu Yulong's. After a long time, Duanmu Feiyu was like the other young disciples, gradually accepting his fate and becoming depressed. Since the next family head was destined to be Duanmu Yulong, why should he work hard? Thus, he became a debauchee, spending his days in wine and women, enjoying himself to his heart's content. And now, Duanmu Yulong was dead. To him, this was simply a surprise that came out of nowhere. Originally, he only planned to be a debauchee young master, enjoying himself to his heart's content. He had no intention of competing for the family head position. But now, he had become a strong candidate for the next family head position. As long as nothing unexpected happened, he would definitely become the next Duanmu family head. How could he not be excited and indescribably surprised? Su-er lowered her head and massaged his legs. Her voice was filled with joy, as if she was overwhelmed by this favor. Congratulations, young master, this servant is naturally happy that young master favors this servant so much. Although her tone was a bit excited and her charming face was filled with pleasant surprise. But in the depths of her eyes, there was a trace of deep disgust and hatred. Duanmu Feiyu did not notice this. He was still leaning against the bed, enjoying the wine and the beauty service, his eyes narrowed in satisfaction. Humph. So what if Big Brother is outstanding? Didn't he still end up dying at an untimely age? Now that things have come to this, it's actually me who's benefiting. Big Madam is crying and crying at home all day, saying that she wants to take revenge for her son. She's causing so much trouble in the manor, it's really annoying. Central State City is still the best, there's wine and beauties. Duanmu Feiyu's mood was extremely good, he could not help but say many things to Su-er. From his words, he revealed the attitude of someone who was about to become the Duanmu family's patriarch and was about to become a noble and important figure. From time to time, Su would respond and flatter Duanmu Feiyu in a soft voice, making him even more pleased with himself and beaming with joy. Unknowingly, 2 hours passed. Duanmu Feiyu calculated that it was already Yushir hour, so he asked Su to help him put on his robe. After Su helped him tidy up his clothes, he hugged Su and kissed her. Only then did he reluctantly leave. Little Su it's already 5 in the evening. This young master has to return to Zhenling Pavilion. If he returned late, he would delay his business. Little beauty, have a good rest. Tomorrow, this young master will come and pamper you. Ha ha ha. Su sent Duanmu Feiyu out of the room. She watched his back disappear into the distance and finally let out a sigh of relief. Her flower-like smile quickly disappeared, and her bashful and delicate demeanor was also restrained. She sat in front of her dressing table with a worried expression, silently lost in thought. A trace of sadness and hatred was contained between her brows. Duanmu Feiyu. You despicable and vulgar beast. I really hope you'll be like your big brother and die soon. Otherwise, when will I ever be able to escape from this demon's den? Su cursed in a low voice, full of hatred. Her fair and pretty face was somewhat distorted, and her eyes were surging with traces of cold light. It was clear that Su had been raised here by Duanmu Feiyu and had to serve him with her beauty every day. There were many twists and turns in her life, as well as many grudges. She used her hands to support her cheeks and sank into deep thought and memories. When she thought of the sad past, tears silently flowed out of her eyes. After an unknown amount of time, Su came back to her senses and suddenly saw a figure appear in the bronze mirror in front of her. It was a handsome young man wearing a white robe. His figure was tall and straight, and his temperament was noble. Su immediately jumped in fright and subconsciously turned her head to look behind her. She saw that 2 people had unknowingly barged into the room. One of them was the white-robed young man, and beside him was a beautiful woman wearing a white dress. The 2 of them seemed to have appeared out of thin air, and there was no sound at all. Although Su was filled with shock, she was still able to maintain her calm and did not let out a panicked scream. She hurriedly raised her sleeve to wipe away the tears on her face, and asked with a vigilant expression, "Who are you? I don't know you, so why have you barged into my room?" The white-robed young man looked at her calmly and said in a gentle tone, "Miss Su there is no need to be afraid. We have no ill intentions." Su frowned and stared at the white-robed young man. She asked, "You actually know my name? Who are you?" The white-robed young man revealed a trace of a smile and said in a playful tone, "This one is Ji Tianqing. I'm sure you've heard of my name before." Su's body suddenly trembled, and her eyes widened slightly as she stared at Ji Tianqing. Of course, she had heard of Ji Tianqing's name before. She knew that he was a peerless prodigy whose name spread throughout the Central Plains, the Honorable Tianqian Region Lord. Moreover, Duanmu Feiyu had just mentioned this name. Su felt a trace of fear in her heart, as well as a strong sense of doubt. She did not understand why Ji Tianqing had suddenly appeared, and why he had quietly barged into her room. However, Su quickly calmed down and said expressionlessly, "Young Master Ji is now a prominent figure in the Central Plains. How could I not know? However, I have never met young Master Ji before. Don't you think it's too rude for you to barge into my room?" Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows and said with a playful smile, "Miss Su, let's not beat around the bush. Duanmu Feiyu has already left, so you don't have to put on an act anymore. Moreover, you also know that I was the one who killed Duanmu Feiyu's eldest brother, Duanmu Yulong." Su frowned, and a strange look flashed through her eyes. She was clearly a bit nervous. "Young Master Ji, what do you mean?" Ji Tianqing did not explain, and said with a serious expression, Miss Su, I heard that you are the princess of the southern Emoli tribe. Because of the great change in your tribe, you lost your home and were kidnapped by the Duanmu Feiyu. Although you serve the Duanmu Feiyu with a forced smile every day, in reality, you don't want to stay here. You just want to escape from the demon's den as soon as possible. Miss Su, am I right? Hearing his words, Su-er's eyes were a bit evasive. She became more and more flustered and did not know what to do. Young Master Ji, what do you want to do? Ji Tianqing revealed a playful smile. Of course I want to save you. I want to help you escape from the claws of the Duanmu Feiyu. Su-er was stunned. She looked at Ji Tianqing in disbelief, and then looked at Yun Yao beside him. After a moment of silence, she asked, Why? Why do you want to help me? Ji Tianqing revealed a confident expression, and said in a low and powerful voice, There is an ancient saying that the enemy of my enemy is my friend. I have a grudge against the Duanmu Feiyu. Miss Su, you are also trapped in the demon's den, being played and destroyed by the Duanmu Feiyu. Chapter 631. With Ji Tianqing's current strength, killing the Duanmu Feiyu wouldn't be difficult. However, his goal was to stir up chaos in the Duanmu clan. It wasn't as simple as killing the Duanmu Feiyu. That was why he was patiently persuading Su-er. Su-er wasn't an ordinary girl. She was the princess of a certain southern tribe. She was well-educated, reasonable, and quick-witted. She immediately understood the purpose of Ji Tianqing's visit and guessed his true intentions. If Su-er's guess is correct, young Master Ji wants to use me to deal with the Duanmu Feiyu, and then deal with the Duanmu clan, right? Su-er calmed down and asked in a calm voice, But I am now deeply loved by the Duanmu Feiyu. I will soon become his wife, and even the Duanmu clan's matriarch in the future. Young Master Ji, why would I give up such riches and glory and join forces with you to deal with the Duanmu Feiyu? Before Ji Tianqing could speak, Yun Yao revealed a wisp of a cold smile and said, Miss Su, you're still probing our attitude even now. The Duanmu Feiyu is a hedonistic young master who commits all sorts of crimes. Countless women have been played and ravaged by him. You are only one of them. In 3 months at most, he will abandon or kill you when he is tired of playing with you. As for marrying you and making you the Duanmu clan's matriarch, those are just flowery words used to make you happy. Even a 3-year-old child wouldn't believe them. Su-er's expression changed again when she heard these words. She was finally certain that the other party had come prepared. He knew the Duanmu Feiyu very well. After a moment of silence, she stared at Ji Tianqing and asked again, But how can I believe that young Master Ji has the strength to oppose the Duanmu clan? If the plan fails, we will all die without a grave. Ji Tianqing smiled confidently and said in a cold voice, You don't need to believe me, because you have no choice. There are only 2 paths in front of you. Either you do as I say, and I'll help you escape from Central State and kill Duanmu Feiyu. Otherwise, you will stay here forever, trapped in the claws of the Duanmu Feiyu, until he abandons you or plays you to death. Ji Tianqing looked down at Su-er from above. His tone was firm and confident. His words were very straightforward, but Su-er was unable to defend herself. Indeed, she was like a bird in a cage now, and she didn't have the slightest chance to resist or escape. If she hadn't met Ji Tianqing, her ending would have been miserable. Su-er pursed her lips and pondered for a long time before she nodded and said, Since young Master Ji is willing to lend a helping hand, this little girl is endlessly grateful. I can promise you, but I need to know what young Master Ji wants me to do first. Ji Tianqing's expression was calm as he said, It's very simple. After I let you out, you have to spread the news throughout Central Continent City. What Duanmu Feiyu said to you just now, you have to spread it word for word. You have to make sure that everyone believes it. Su-er was stunned for a moment. She asked in disbelief, That's all? She originally thought that what Ji Tianqing wanted her to do would be extremely difficult and dangerous. However, she didn't expect that it would be as simple as spreading the news. Ji Tianqing nodded and said, "That's right, it's just that simple. Of course, if Duanmu Feiyu told you any other secrets, or if he said anything outrageous, you can also add oil to the fire and spread it." Su let out a sigh of relief as if a heavy burden had been lifted from her shoulders. She hurriedly nodded and said, "No problem, I'll definitely do as you say. However, there is a mysterious great formation set up in the superior courtyard. There are also many guards and hidden sentries, so the defense is very tight. Duanmu Feiyu even put on the Golden Moon magical bracelet for me. There is a powerful formation on it, so I can't leave the superior courtyard. Even if I manage to escape, he will be able to quickly find me with the help of the Golden Moon magical bracelet." After she finished speaking, she slightly lifted the hem of her long skirt and stretched out her right leg. A dark golden bracelet could be seen on her fair and delicate ankle. It emitted a faint golden light and the aura of a formation. Ji Tianqing stared at the Golden Moon magical bracelet and sized it up. Then, he confidently said, "The great formation and hidden sentries of the superior courtyard are nothing to me. Otherwise, how would I have been able to sneak into your room? As for the Golden Moon magical bracelet on your ankle, it is only a heaven origin grade treasure. I can help you break it right now." Hearing these words, Su's eyes were filled with joy. She was also somewhat excited. Since young Master Ji's strength and methods are so brilliant, then Su can be at ease. Soon after, Ji Tianqing spent an hour to break the formation on the Golden Moon magical bracelet and personally took it off. Without the Golden Moon magical bracelet's restraint, Su finally regained her freedom. Her mood became even more excited. The sky was already dark and the curtain of night was about to descend. Ji Tianqing and Yunyao brought Su out of the room and stealthily made their way outside. Ji Tianqing used his spiritual sense to explore the surroundings. He knew the situation within a radius of 400 meters like the back of his hand. He was able to discover those patrolling guards and hidden sentries in advance. The three of them cleverly avoided those guards and hidden sentries and silently arrived at the corner of the courtyard wall. After Ji Tianqing used his great formation arts to break the great defensive formation, he smoothly brought Yunyao and Su out of the superior courtyard. When it was time to light the lanterns, the three of them left Shui Qing Street and entered the Cloud Mist Inn in the city. After the three of them entered the room, Su hurriedly knelt in front of Ji Tianqing and bowed to him in thanks. "Many thanks to young Master Ji for saving my life. Su will never forget such a great kindness." Ji Tianqing raised his hand and used an invisible force to help her up. He said with a calm expression, "Miss Su, if you want to thank me, then do what I told you to do. I know you hate Duanmu Feiyu, but you don't have the strength to kill him for revenge. As long as you can do what I told you to do, he will be consigned to eternal damnation and will die without a doubt." Su's eyes surged with hatred and murderous intent. She nodded and said, "Young Master Ji, don't worry. I will do as you say. When I was imprisoned in the superior courtyard, I was filled with despair and humiliation. I thought of suicide many times. However, the reason why I endured the humiliation and lived until today was because I wanted to wait for a chance. I wanted to see that beast Duanmu Feiyu die with my own eyes." Ji Tianqing stared at her. Seeing that her expression and tone were sincere, he nodded and said, "That's right. Evil people must pay the price for their evil deeds. You don't need me to teach you what to do next, do you?" Su shook her head and said with a calm voice, "There's no need for young Master Ji to worry about this. Su already has a plan and a method. It's getting late. I'll go take care of this matter now. Otherwise, by tomorrow evening, Duanmu Feiyu will discover that I've escaped." Ji Tianqing nodded slightly and said, "All right, then you can go." Su bowed and said respectfully, "Once again, many thanks for young Master Ji's kindness in saving my life. This little girl will take her leave now." After saying this, Su-er turned and walked out of the room. She quietly left the cloud mist in. The room quieted down. Yunyao turned her head to look at Ji Tianqing and asked, "Tianqing, you trust her so much that you let her go just like that?" Chapter 632. Ji Tianqing believed that Su-er wouldn't go back on her word and would definitely do as he instructed. However, he wouldn't completely trust Su-er and had already made preparations beforehand. When he helped Su-er break the Golden Moon magical bracelet, he secretly set up a formation imprint on Su-er's body. That imprint was invisible and only he could sense it. He could use that imprint to detect Su-er's location. If Su-er kept her word and did what she promised, that imprint would naturally disappear after a few days. If Su-er secretly ran away, he could quickly capture her. Ji Tianqing explained to Yunyao and smiled. "In short, you don't have to worry. We just need to wait and see." Only then did Yunyao relax. She nodded and said, "I hope that Su-er can be of some use. Otherwise, we'll have alerted the enemy." Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows and said with certainty, "Even if our first operation doesn't succeed, we can still find another opportunity. Duanmu Feiyu is a hedonistic young master. Who knows how many crimes he has committed and how many atrocities he has committed. If we use him as a breakthrough point, we'll definitely find a way to deal with him." The two of them chatted for a while before calming down. They both sat cross-legged on the bed and silently meditated to cultivate. The night passed by quickly. On the morning of the second day, Ji Tianqing and Yunyao finished cultivating at almost the same time. The two of them used a secret technique to change their appearances and left the room together. When they reached the main hall of the inn, they saw a group of people gathered at the entrance. Everyone was staring at the wall at the entrance and whispering to each other about something. The two of them looked at each other and walked to the entrance with doubts in their hearts. They raised their heads and looked at the wall outside. They saw a large piece of xian paper stuck to the wall. There were over 1,000 words written on the paper and they were arranged into more than 10 lines. The second son of the Duanmu family's patriarch, Duanmu Huang, Duanmu Feiyu, is truly a despicable and shameless bastard. He's worse than pigs and dogs. 3 years ago, Duanmu Feiyu took a fancy to the daughter of the Yu family in Central State City. He tried to force her several times but failed, so he plotted against the Yu family. The Yu family was completely exterminated. Only the daughter was left alive, but she was kidnapped by Duanmu Feiyu. After 3 months of torture, she was cruelly killed. 2 years ago, Duanmu Feiyu was responsible for the destruction of Tianfeng Lu in Xiang City and the murder of nearly 1,000 people. The Duanmu Feiyu and Duanmu Feiyus killed Duanmu Feiyu. Duanmu Feiyu. Duanmu Feiyu tried to buy the Duanmu Feiyu's Duanmu Feiyu and buy the Duanmu Feiyu. In the past 2 years, there had been 3 young ladies who had mysteriously disappeared in the Water Plain City. No one knew if they were dead or alive, and no one knew if they were dead or alive. He was greedy for beauty, so he secretly sent people to kidnap the 3 young ladies and imprison them in the superior courtyard on Shuiqing Street. He took turns to play with and ravage them. After a few months, he killed all 3 of them. When Ji Tianqing and Yunyao saw the contents of the paper, a sneer flashed in their eyes. There was no doubt that the 1,000 words on the paper were all about the crimes committed by the Duanmu Feiyu. However, among the dozen or so crimes, the last few were the most important and the most interesting. Over the past 5 years, Duanmu Feiyu has taken advantage of his position to fill his own pockets and wantonly take over the Duanmu family's businesses and resources to squander and enjoy himself. Especially after Duanmu Yulong was killed, Duanmu Feiyu became even more unbridled. He had already secretly seized 16 pill workshops and manors, and their value was immeasurable. After Duanmu Yulong died, Duanmu Feiyu was pleasantly surprised. He spent his days indulging in sensual pleasures and indulging in drunken pleasures. Duanmu Feiyu even thought that he could replace Duanmu Yulong and become the next head of the Duanmu family. He was always complacent and considered himself as the successor of the family. Over 1,000 words were written on the paper, announcing all the evil deeds of the Duanmu Feiyu to the public. Moreover, the words that the Duanmu Feiyu said in the superior courtyard yesterday were also written on the paper. Ji Tianqing and Yunyao both understood that this matter was definitely done by Su He. There were more than 30 people surrounding the entrance, and most of them were the common people of Central State City. After everyone finished reading the contents of the paper, they all revealed shocked expressions and discussed with righteous indignation. I really didn't expect that not only was second young master Duanmu a hedonistic playboy, but he also did so many cruel and evil deeds. The 10 or so tragedies mentioned here all happened in recent years. I didn't expect that they were all done by the Duanmu Feiyu. That's right. With the power of the Duanmu family, wouldn't it be easy for them to exterminate those small families? Too cruel. That bastard Duanmu Feiyu simply isn't human. There were many rumors in the past that said that Duanmu Feiyu had done many outrageous things. His evil deeds aren't limited to just these. Duanmu Feiyu is simply a bastard. His big brother just died not long ago. Not only is he not in a hurry to take revenge for his big brother, he even claps his hands and applauds. He is simply inhumane. This fellow is the second young master of the Duanmu family, yet he actually filled his own pockets and embezzled his family's assets and resources. This kind of person simply deserves to die. I just came from the southern part of the city. I saw that the streets, alleys, restaurants, and tea houses were all pasted with these papers. Many people were discussing this matter. Who pasted these papers? Who has such guts? Could it be that they aren't afraid of death? The people of the Duanmu family are too arrogant and despotic, especially the young masters of Duanmu Feiyu's generation. Each one of them is more vicious than the other. Of course it would arouse the anger of the people. The discussions of the people entered the ears of Ji Tianqing and Yunyao. The two of them looked at each other and then quietly left the crowd. They continued to walk along the main street. 2 hours later, the two of them passed through several streets and alleys. They saw that the streets, restaurants, tea houses, and other places with many people were all pasted with similar posters. Every poster would attract the attention of many people, creating heated discussions. Duanmu Feiyu was also cursed and condemned by many people. In a single night, tens of thousands of posters appeared out of nowhere in Central State City. They were pasted on the streets and alleys, as well as places where people gathered. In just half a day, more than half of Central State City's people were alarmed. Countless people went to look at these posters. They angrily discussed and cursed. Central State City was in an uproar. All kinds of rumors and slanders flew everywhere. The people's complaints were everywhere. Their hatred for the Duanmu family rapidly increased. Duanmu Feiyu also became notorious. He became a demon that countless people hated and loathed. Even though the Duanmu family's people found that the situation was bad, they quickly sent out large amounts of people to tear down these posters in the city. However, there were just too many posters in the city. Even if the Duanmu family's people had 3 heads and 6 arms, they couldn't quickly remove them. In addition, many people had already seen the posters. Through word of mouth, the news had already spread. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.